LoveLore Library. Chapter 190. Qin Yining's heart had been hanging in the air for the past few days. When he saw Qin Huaiyuan being led in by Qi Tai, he finally relaxed. However, when he saw his father's sorry state, Qin Yining's footsteps paused, and tears almost fell from his eyes. When he was imprisoned, the emperor had decreed that his official robes, boots, hat, belt, and other items had been stripped off. Now, Qin Huaiyuan was only wearing a dirty inner garment and silk pants. His hair was loose and crooked, and strands of hair fell down messily. There were even 2 strands of straw stuck to the top of his head, and even his beard was tangled into a ball. His father, who was as confident and wise as a banished immortal, was now in such a sorry state. Qin Yining clenched his teeth and used all his strength to not cry out loud. He quickly ran forward and knelt down, hugging Qin Huaiyuan's leg. "Father." Qin Huaiyuan lowered his head and raised his hand to pat his daughter's head. However, when he saw the dust on his palm and the dirt under his fingernails, and then looked at Qin Yining's neatly combed and shiny black hair, he hesitated and withdrew his hand. He only smiled and said, "Quickly get up. Father is fine. Didn't I come back in one piece?" This scene made the servants at the side unable to stop themselves from sobbing. Qin Huaiyuan stood there in a daze. He didn't expect Qin Huaiyuan to fall to such a state. Qin Yining rubbed Qin Huaiyuan's knee with longing and blinked back his tears. Only then did he stand up and smile brilliantly at Qin Huaiyuan. "Father, do you want to take a bath first, or do you want to go see old madam first?" Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, "Let's take a bath first to avoid scaring the old madam." Seeing that Qin Huaining was also present, Qin Huaiyuan said, "Sister Hui has returned." Qin Huaining came back to her senses. She quickly walked forward and kowtowed to him. "Father, daughter has returned. In the past, I was immature and made many mistakes. I have disappointed you, father. Please be magnanimous and forgive me." Qin Huaining's forehead was pressed to the ground. She was very humble. Qin Huaiyuan looked at Qin Huaining with a complicated look in his eyes for a moment before he said, "Yes. Since Sister Yi has allowed you to come back, you should stay here. In the future, you must abide by your duty and never do that kind of thing again." Qin Huaining's heart skipped a beat. Since returning to the Marquis Fu today, this was the first time he had seen Qin Yining's position in the Fu. Now, Qin Yining was the one in charge of the inner residence. Old Madam, the Sun Clan, Second Madam, and Third Madam all had to listen to her arrangements. Why did she curry favor with Old Madam and the Sun Clan in the past? Wasn't it because the patriarch had the right to speak? Now that Qin Yining was in charge, she had actually schemed against Qin Yining just now. Qin Huaining suddenly realized that she and Qin Yining were no longer opponents. Because opponents first had to stand on equal footing. She and Qin Yining could never be equals. Qin Yining had stepped on her head so easily and proudly. And if she wanted to preserve her life, she could only rely on her family Qin. As long as she relied on her family Qin, she could not offend Qin Yining. This realization made her heart ache, but there was nothing she could do about it. However, she had suffered enough in the farmstead. She did not want to live another day of being harassed by refugees in the chaos of war. "Father, daughter understands. In the future, I will definitely listen to old madam, father, and mother. I will also listen to fourth young Mrs. orders." Hearing her sincere tone and change in the way she addressed him, Qin Huaiyuan nodded and said, "That's good." At this time, Qin Yining had already arranged for people to report the news to various parts of the inner residence. He also had people prepare a fragrant bath in the side room of the outer courtyard study. When Qin Huaiyuan and Qi Tai went to bathe and change clothes, Qin Yining ordered the kitchen to prepare a banquet. It would be held in the reception pavilion of Ci Shao Garden later. Qin Huayuan was safe and sound, and the whole family was reunited. They had to be happy. After giving these orders, Qin Yining could not sit still for a moment. His heart was filled with happiness and excitement that his father had returned safely. He stood outside the study and waited for Qin Huayuan. After a full hour, Qin Huayuan finally came out. At this time, his hair was half dry and tied loosely on the top of his head. He wore a black net to hold it in place. He wore a jasper-colored silk robe and soft cloth boots. Although he had lost some weight, he still looked as elegant and graceful as before. Qin Yining said with a smile, "Father, let's go back together." "Okay." Qin Huayuan smiled and nodded. "Qi Tai just told me about the matters in the residence. You did very well." "Father, don't praise me. It was my first time managing the household, and I was in a panic. It was thanks to old Madam and Mother's guidance that I was able to stabilize myself." "Girl, you've learned to be modest." Qin Huayuan laughed in spite of himself. "You're very smart and courageous. You're even better at figuring out people's hearts. This is very good. This time, what you did at home and what you did outside were all very good. If you didn't take in the refugees, I'm afraid Father would have to spend a lot of effort to come back." Qin Yining was naturally happy to be praised by her father, but what she cared about the most was the last sentence. "Father, is His Majesty angry?" Qin Huayuan nodded. "He is angry. After all, your residence on Changchun Mountain is adjacent to the Empress residence. I won't go into detail about what the common people think. You can also analyze why His Majesty was angry. However, because of this, the common people's voices became louder, and Chao Guozhang couldn't do anything to me. His Majesty was also somewhat afraid. Taking advantage of the fact that the people of Qinglu pleaded for me again, His Majesty relented. It's just that your second uncle was implicated and was transferred to the Ministry of Rights as an assistant minister. The Ministry of Revenue and the Ministry of Rights were both third-rank officials, but the Ministry of Revenue and the Ministry of Rights were naturally different. The reason why His Majesty was willing to release Qin Huayuan earlier was probably because he was afraid that Chao Guozhang would take the opportunity to make a move, right? After all, even if His Majesty was angry, he still retained a trace of reason. He wanted to keep Qin Huayuan, a good helper, to restrain Chao Guozhang in the future. In fact, Qin Yining was already very happy that His Majesty didn't remove all the officials in the family Qin in one breath. The most fortunate thing was that she didn't do anything wrong. As long as I can help Father, it's fine. What I'm most afraid of is doing something wrong and making things worse. How could that be? Qin Huayuan smiled. Fortunately, your second uncle, and third uncle are outside taking care of things. Also, I've received the things you had people send over. That medicine is indeed very good at preventing mosquitoes. Otherwise, I might have been bitten all over by now. Qin Yining smiled and said, "It's all thanks to Master Zhong's thoughtfulness." The father and daughter chatted casually as if they had endless things to talk about. Qin Huayuan also acted as if he had never experienced the calamity of being imprisoned. Their attitudes were normal, and it was as if this chaos had never bothered them. At this time, the entire family was gathered in old Madam's Xixiao garden. Even 11th cousin, who rarely appeared, was there. As soon as she saw Qin Huayuan, old Madam couldn't stop crying. She hugged her eldest son and cried until her face was covered in tears and snot. Second master and third master also circled around Qin Huayuan. They patted his shoulder and comforted him about his suffering. The womenfolk on the side smiled and wiped their tears. The members of the Sun clan were grinning and smiling. Their eyes were red from crying. Not long after, a servant reported that the banquet had been prepared. Qin Yining smiled and went to support old Madam. "Today, the entire family is here." Let's have a good reunion dinner. Old Madam is a person who has both good fortune and longevity. In the future, our family will be safe and sound. Have more good fortune and longevity. Old Madam was very happy to hear this and repeatedly said, "Good, good." The entire family laughed and entered the banquet. Because it was a family banquet and Qin Huayuan was rarely scared but not in danger, Old Madam ordered the screen in the middle to be removed. Although the family abided by the rule of not talking while eating, the atmosphere during the meal was very cheerful and harmonious. Chapter 191. Hearing this, everyone put down their teacups and looked at Qin Huayuan. It was obvious that the Qin family respected him. Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "I haven't been home these days, so I've troubled second brother and third brother." "Eldest brother, what are you talking about? There hasn't been any major events at home these days, so we don't need to do anything. Besides, Old Madam, eldest sister-in-law, and Sister Yi are in the inner residence. These days, we've closed the door and declined visitors. We've been very cautious, hoping that eldest brother can come back safe and sound. Now that big brother is fine, we have a pillar of support for our family." Second master spoke very seriously and sincerely, and everyone nodded. Qin Huayuan shook his head and smiled bitterly. He waved his hand and said, "Second brother, your words really make me feel ashamed. If I hadn't been implicated, second brother wouldn't have lost your official position and fallen to the Ministry of Rights." Second master's heart warmed when he heard this, and he shook his head repeatedly. "If eldest brother hadn't promoted me, and if my colleagues in the imperial court hadn't given eldest brother face, with my aptitude, I would have had to work like boiling oil for who knows how many more decades to become a third-rank official of the Ministry of Revenue. I won't forget eldest brother's help at that time. Now, it's not eldest brother's fault. Eldest brother was innocently implicated, so how can I blame you? Besides, we're one family, so there's no need to speak like two families." "Exactly." Third master also nodded. Third master respected Qin Huayuan very much. Qin Huayuan was a transparent and upright person. Even though third master was born of a concubine, Qin Huayuan had never used his status as the eldest son of the first wife to bully him. When third master was convinced that he wasn't cut out for studying and decided to take over the family business, it was Qin Huayuan who arranged for him inside and outside. It was unknown how much money he had secretly made to help third master gain a firm foothold. Therefore, third master had always been grateful to Qin Huayuan. Now that he heard second master's words, he also nodded repeatedly. Old Madam saw that her three sons were so harmonious and laughed. She lowered her voice and said to Mammy Qin and second Madam beside her, "Look at these brothers." Second Madam pursed her lips and smiled. Mammy Qin whispered in Old Madam's ear, "It's hard to find such harmonious brothers in the capital. It's all thanks to Old Madam's good upbringing." When Old Madam heard this, her heart felt even more comforted. People were in high spirits when encountering happy events. Right now, her face was glowing. Qin Huayuan sighed and said, "Second brother and third brother don't mind. That's because you're of noble character. But in the end, I understand that it was because I was the one who stood out." Turning to his family, Qin Huayuan said, "You all know that De Zhou's troops are at the city gates. Xihua City is in a precarious situation. If Xihua City falls, the Tiger Army will have nothing to worry about. Their next target will be the capital. Right now, His Majesty is at his wit's end, therefore, he is using Chao Guozhang to contact the Titan. Chao Guozhang and I have never seen eye to eye. His Majesty is using the Chao family, naturally he wants to suppress our family. Although I've been released from prison and returned home, I'm afraid that the days ahead will be filled with danger." When everyone heard this, their relaxed expressions from just a moment ago disappeared. The topic was heavy, so second madam and third madam wanted to send the younger children away. After all, Qin Yining's 11th cousin was only 7 years old. They were afraid that children would talk nonsense outside. However, Qin Huayuan waved his hand and said, "Second sister-in-law, third sister-in-law, the ways of the world have changed. There are some things that we should let the children know. I've already ordered people to stand guard outside. What we say won't get out." 11th Master Qin Zong also nodded repeatedly and said to second madam, "Mother, don't worry. Your son isn't young anymore. He knows what to say and what not to say." Only then did second madam and third madam nod and sit down. Qin Huayuan continued, "Our family Qin has always handled matters in an upright manner. However, in today's world, people can't live long simply by being a good person. Just in case, I have to make arrangements in advance. If something unexpected happens to me, I'll entrust the family to second brother. Second brother is an official in the imperial court and has seen many things. He'll be able to grasp the direction at critical moments. Second brother is worthy of the position of clan head of the Qin clan. When the time comes, all of you will have to listen to his arrangements. Marquis, you." When the members of the Sun clan heard this, tears welled up in their eyes. The Dowager Duchess also frowned. Her face was deathly pale as she said, "Meng Her, don't speak nonsense. Nothing will happen to you. You'll live a long life." Qin Huayuan smiled placatingly at his wife and mother. He said, "The current arrangements are only to ensure that nothing will go wrong. The ways of the world are like this. As the clan head, I have to make the necessary arrangements. Mother, don't stop me." The Dowager Duchess hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she didn't stop him. The color of blood drained from her face, and she took out a handkerchief to silently wipe her tears. Qin Huayuan didn't care about their tears. He earnestly instructed second master, "If I am secretly assassinated, second brother, take the entire family and immediately leave the capital and return to our old home. The sacrificial field near the ancestral grave was purchased by me many years ago. Although it can't allow the family to continue to prosper, it won't be difficult to feed the entire family. Even if His Majesty wants to punish us and confiscate our family, he won't seize our sacrificial field. This way, the entire family will be safe, and the family's sacrificial offerings can be passed down." Eldest brother. Second master's heart trembled. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. It turned out that long ago, when Qin Huayuan was still the icing on the cake and adding oil to the fire, he had already thought of a way out for the entire family. This is only one possibility. Qin Huayuan sighed. He looked at the entire family and said, "If no one secretly assassinates me, once my political opponents do something and take the opportunity to trample on me in the imperial court, I'm afraid that the situation will become even more serious. At that time, the ones who will be implicated will be our entire family. What happened to Duke Ding might be our family's precedent." As soon as he said this, the hall fell into a deathly silence. Many people revealed frightened expressions. Some of the younger children were so frightened that they cried. Even the Dowager Duchess, the Sun clan, second madam, and third madam were so frightened that their faces turned pale. If that really happened, the family would be completely ruined. At that time, they wouldn't even have the qualifications to go back and farm. Qin Huayuan turned his gaze to Qin Yining. "Sister Yi, you have the Tian Jizi's approval. It's an extremely precious life. Even if it's for a good omen, His Majesty won't do anything to you. When the time comes, you have to think of a way to ensure the safety of all the women in the family. As for the men, they couldn't escape." Qin Yining stood up and bowed seriously. "Don't worry, father. If there really comes a day, I'll definitely shoulder my responsibility." "I know what you're worried about." I'll do whatever you're worried about. Qin Huaiyuan looked at his beloved daughter. His eyebrows and eyes curved into crescents. He nodded and said, "Very good. Sister Yi is so sensible. Father is very relieved." Qin Yining broke out in a cold sweat when she heard Qin Huaiyuan's disheartened tone, as if he was giving his last words. However, she maintained a serious expression and said, "Father, don't be too pessimistic. The current situation hasn't reached that point yet. We still have a lot of room for maneuver. Where there is a will, there is a way. Father, even if you are disheartened by some people, you can't lose hope in life. As long as you still have a breath, you shouldn't give up hope." Qin Yining's words immediately stabbed Qin Huaiyuan's heart, causing a crack to appear on his calm smile. No one noticed it. Only his daughter did. He was truly disheartened. He was disheartened by the emperor, the imperial court, and the dark future of the Yan dynasty. He had worked hard for so many years. Even if the emperor was muddle-headed and incompetent, he didn't have any thoughts of passing. He only wanted to do his duty well and assist the emperor in managing the Yan dynasty well so that the people could live and work in peace and contentment. That was his lifelong wish. But now, the emperor was still muddle-headed. The iron hooves of Dezhou still wanted to trample the Dayan. The people he had worked hard to protect were treated like animals by the emperor. When the refugees entered the city, they didn't have a roof to shelter them from the sun. They didn't even have an inch of mats to sleep on. Every day, they were only given porridge and soup. Children and old people who died of illness were left on the streets in carts to be cremated in mass graves. The emperor's way of doing things was even worse than his daughter's. His daughter didn't have money, but she knew to sell all her valuables to feed the refugees. The emperor was such an important person, yet he didn't know this. He had money, but he didn't save the people. Instead, he bought clothes and jewelry for the demon empress. When he was released from the Ministry of Justice's prison, he had arranged for someone to inform him of the emperor's actions over the past few days. At that moment, Qin Huaiyuan felt as if his burning heart had been dug out and thrown into an ice cave. In the past, he was ignorant. He actually had hope in this kind of emperor. However, since ancient times, a woman won't marry two husbands, a servant won't serve two masters. Qin Mang was born at the wrong time. He didn't meet a wise emperor, but he also didn't want to be a treacherous servant. He was bitterly disappointed. He didn't want to take any more actions. He also didn't want to work for this kind of emperor. Although he wouldn't betray him, he also didn't want to try his best. He thought that no one could understand or see through his thoughts. However, Qin Yining saw through it. The scene fell into a dead silence again. Everyone looked at Qin Yining and Qin Huaiyuan in silence. They seemed to understand Qin Huaiyuan's desolate mood at this moment. Second Old Master and Third Old Master frowned. Old Madam, Sun Clan, and the others felt sorry for Qin Huaiyuan. They were so sad that they cried. Qin Yining stood up and walked slowly to Qin Huaiyuan. She slowly knelt down and put her hands on Qin Huaiyuan's knees. She looked up at Qin Huaiyuan. "Father, you're disappointed in those people. You're disappointed in this world. Your life's ambition was destroyed by that person. I know the pain in your heart. If that person was a wise emperor, if that person could realize your ambition, even if he used you to your last advantage and made you into a stepping stone, you wouldn't feel regret or resentment, even though your heart is bitter. However, that person is a pile of mud that can't be supported. He doesn't even have that kind of thought. Instead, he despises your efforts and persecutes you." Qin Yining's eyes were bright and clear. Although she didn't say the words, "incapable emperor," everyone knew what she was talking about. Qin Huaiyuan looked down at Qin Yining. The hands on his knees gradually clenched into fists. Father, I grew up in the marketplace. In the past, Liang City was in chaos for many years. I've seen too many of those dark things. Human lives are the most cheap. In one family, there were 7 children, 4 girls, and 3 boys. In order to feed the entire family, as a mother, I had no choice but to start selling the eldest daughter. At first, the market was good. The eldest daughter was sold for 1 tael of silver. Later on, things went bad. 10 caddies of buckwheat noodles were exchanged for the youngest girl. The food that was exchanged for was enough to feed the 3 boys. As a mother, I felt sad. As a brother, I felt guilty because their lives were exchanged for by selling their family. However, these people, no matter how difficult it is, will still do their best to live. They will work hard until their last breath. Father, even if you're no longer the Prime Minister or the Grand Preceptor, even if we're no longer rich and have to farm in the future, our family will still be alive. Being alive is our biggest asset. Father, why are you so pessimistic? Why do you have to lose hope? Qin Huaiyuan suddenly asked in a choked voice, what about you? Qin Yining was stunned. Chapter 192. When the people around heard Qin Huaiyuan's dry voice and saw the father and daughter looking at each other, the women's tears flowed down again. The Sun clan buried their faces in their hands and sobbed uncontrollably. They were so ashamed that they wished they could dig a hole and bury themselves in it. Qin Yining blinked and showed a big smile. The dimples on her cheeks were very cute. I naturally ate as much as I could when I could and slept as much as I could when I could. Unknowingly, I survived. Unknowingly. Yes, I didn't have any other requirements for myself. I just ate and slept as much as I could. When my life became so simple, I didn't have any worries. Living in the mountains, although I had to do everything by myself, it was also very relaxing and carefree. Qin Huaiyuan looked at Qin Yining's bright eyes and felt as if he was in a warm and clear lake bathed in sunlight. That kind of untainted firmness was something that he, who was immersed in officialdom and the mortal world, could not achieve. However, the hearts of the whole family were in a perilous situation. They had always lived a life of luxury, with beautiful servants and children. When had they ever suffered? It was because their lives were too comfortable that they became greedier. They would be jealous because their sister had a more beautiful hairpin than them. They would think about their own status because they had to carry the food boxes in the kitchen sooner or later. They used to think that such complicated thoughts were something that rich and powerful people should have. But now, thinking about it, it was so ridiculous. They boasted that they had a golden body, but they were all plants in a greenhouse. They couldn't survive even a little bit of wind and rain. But what about Qin Yining? She was also a real rich young lady, but she was like a famous flower that had been moved out of the greenhouse too early. In the storm, she had actually taken root deep in the ground that was full of hard stones. She had even bloomed a proud flower that was so beautiful and so tenacious. Her body contained a kind of power. She was fearless, determined, and indifferent, which made everyone's heart tremble. Suddenly, they felt that their fear was too much. At worst, they could go to farm. That would be much better than Qin Yining. At least they could still be together as a family. What was there to be afraid of? This was the first time that a Qin family member had reevaluated their lives in the face of danger. It was also the first time that he had such clear admiration and affection for Qin Yining. It was not mixed with any other factors, but only because of her. Qin Huaiyuan's mood was the same as his family's. His knitted brows slowly relaxed, and a smile appeared on his face. He hid the guilt he felt towards this child in his heart and patted her shoulder with his big hand. Father understands. That kind of affection made the cousins feel envious, because most of the unmarried women's relationship with their fathers stopped at the level of daily greetings. Very few were like Qin Yining and Qin Huaiyuan. That kind of scene made people feel warm in their hearts. When Qin Yining saw Qin Huaiyuan's gaze gradually calm, she secretly breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Father, you understood long ago. But you are not made of iron. How can you not have your own emotions?" Qin Yining stood up. When she turned around, she saw that her family was looking at her differently. She immediately felt uncomfortable and stood behind Qin Huaiyuan with a hot face. Qin Huaiyuan could not help but laugh. Her embarrassed appearance made everyone in the family laugh. The atmosphere in the hall relaxed and was no longer as oppressive as before. Qin Huaiyuan looked at his family's expressions and then looked at Qin Yining standing beside him. He could not help but smile again. His daughter was so outstanding. It made him feel gratified, proud, and more than that, doting on her. Today, I said a little more. The purpose is to let our family see the reality clearly. We can also determine our own position so that we won't make mistakes when we are amateurs. Qin Huaiyuan stood up and returned to his usual steady and elegant appearance. He said with a smile, "Everyone can disperse. Rest early." Yes. Everyone stood up and bowed to the old madam. The second branch and the third branch all left. Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan supported the old madam back to her bedroom. The old madam was still in a state of shock and emotion. After spending some effort to comfort her, Qin Huaiyuan led the Sun clan and Qin Yining out. Qin Huaiyuan was on the left, and Qin Yining supported the Sun clan on the right. When they walked, the Sun clan's shoulder could always touch Qin Huaiyuan's arm. The summer clothes were made of thin fabric. Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan could feel the warmth of each other's arms. The two looked at each other and could not help but smile. Qin Huaiyuan's smile was as elegant and gentle as before. The Sun clan's face heated up when she saw it. The smile on her face became wider and wider, making her eyes that were swollen from crying disappear from her smile. Seeing his parents like this, Qin Yining quietly let go of the Sun clan's arm. He slowly slowed down his steps and took the servant girl back to the Shuoran study hall. Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan walked side by side on the road back to Xingning Garden. The Sun clan repeatedly asked Qin Huaiyuan about his situation in prison, whether he had been injured, whether he had been tortured, how many meals he could eat in a day, and so on. Qin Huaiyuan did not want to cause the Sun clan to worry needlessly, so he smiled and brushed it all off. He was very particular about speaking. Every time the Sun clan could not grasp the main point, she only felt gratified. She ignored what she asked and what Qin Huaiyuan answered. She only focused on getting Qin Huaiyuan's smile and gentle tone. When the two arrived at the gate of Xingning Garden, they saw a delicate figure dressed in a magenta robe standing at the gate under the palace lantern in front of the courtyard. Her long black hair was combed into a peony bun, and the pearl tassels at the back of her bun swayed softly. Perhaps hearing the footsteps, that person turned her head. With a gentle and humble smile on her beautiful face, she curtsied and said, "This concubine greets Marquis and Madam." The Sun clan's footsteps paused, and their faces turned cold. Qin Huaiyuan nodded and said, "Why did you come here at this time?" This concubine heard that Marquis had returned to the mansion, so this concubine specially came to pay respects to Marquis. Chao Yuqing raised her eyes and looked at Qin Huaiyuan with her watery eyes. Just by looking at her eyes, one could tell that she had feelings for Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Huaiyuan did not seem to notice. He nodded and said, "You're very considerate." "I'm fine. It's late, and there are mosquitoes in the summer night. You should go back and rest early." Chao Yuqing slightly pursed her red lips and looked at Qin Huaiyuan for a long time before curtsying again. Yes, thank you for your concern, Marquis. I won't disturb Marquis and Madam. This concubine will take her leave. N. Qin Huayuan casually pointed at a servant girl and said, "You take the lantern and send concubine mother back." The little girl immediately obeyed and went to fetch a bright lantern. Qiao Yuqing looked deeply at Qin Huayuan before turning to leave. Her back was stubbornly straight, and the pearl tassels at the back of her head swayed with her footsteps, making her look a bit fragile. Qin Huayuan's eyes were deep. After a while, he smiled and entered the courtyard with the Sun clan. P.S. Stupid Moon saw all the comments in the comments section, but she couldn't reply since yesterday. She always said that there was a verification error. Chapter 193. Late at night, dark clouds covered the moonlight, and a heavy rain was about to come. Outside Xihua City, the tired Dayan soldiers had all fallen asleep, and only a few patrolling teams were walking around the camp. Suddenly, the sound of arrows piercing through the air could be heard. Before the patrolling soldiers could react, they were shot in the neck and fell down before they could even make a sound. In the dark, hundreds of strong men with steel swords rushed into the Dayan camp quickly like black leopards. They took advantage of the fact that the soldiers were sleeping and killed them. The long battle made the soldiers extremely tired. It was not easy for them to defeat the enemy so that they could sleep peacefully. Who would have thought that this was done by the Tiger Army on purpose? Many people were beheaded in their sleep. It was not until the Tiger Army killed nearly 100 people that one of the soldiers woke up and realized that something was wrong. When he opened his eyes, he saw the group of enemies with bloody swords. Ah, someone is attacking the camp. Oh my God! General Wang was killed. The Dayan camp was in chaos. The sound of killing was endless. In an instant, flames were everywhere, and screams were heard. The battle lasted until dawn. In the drizzle, Peng Xiao led 100,000 Tiger Army to enter Xihua City. They quickly took over the government office and the granary, took over the defense of the city, and locked up the important surviving officials and their families in the prison. They arranged for a large number of soldiers to guard the prison, and arranged for the captives to be sent to the prisoner camp. At the same time, Peng Xiao issued a few military orders. The Tiger Army is not allowed to rob people's property, rape women, or trample on the fertile land in Xihua City. If there are daily necessities, you can trade, but you can't go back on your word. Once you are found to have violated the military order, you will be punished with 100 sticks. He pointed at the two men who were kneeling in the tent and said, "These two men raped women. Take them out and punish them according to military law as a warning to others." Yes. Someone immediately obeyed the order and dragged the two disheveled men away. Soon, the sound of sticks hitting flesh could be heard from outside the tent. Zheng Pei frowned and said disapprovingly, "Wang Yi, by punishing the soldiers like this, I'm afraid our brothers will be bitterly disappointed. They followed you and fought a bloody battle. It was just a small matter. Why did you have to be like this? 100 strokes from the military rod will kill him." Peng Xiao's black armor was stained with blood, and there were brown spots of blood splattered on his handsome face. His long eyebrows were slanted, and his phoenix eyes were slightly narrowed. At this moment, he was surrounded by a fierce murderous aura, as if he was a demon that had walked out of hell. He was even more dignified than usual. Zheng Pei lowered his head. The other generals and captains of the Tiger Army in the tent also became solemn. "Then, does Mr. Zheng have your Majesty's secret decree?" Peng Xiao said with a smile. But in Zheng Pei's ears, these words were like slaps to his face. He was Peng Zhongjing's aide and Peng Xiao's trusted aide. That was why he was able to gain a foothold in the Tiger Army as a strategist. Zheng Pei knew the Tiger Army's admiration and trust for Peng Xiao. It could be said that even if your majesty didn't give him a commander's seal, Peng Shao would be a living commander's seal. His words were more effective than a real commander's seal. If these people knew what he had done, it would reduce his prestige. Even if there was nothing wrong with being close to your majesty, he was still a traitor emotionally. The emperor was suspicious. Even if he spoke the truth, the emperor might not fully believe him. Although Peng Shao was intelligent and cunning, he had a benevolent heart. As long as he performed well, he would definitely be protected. As such, Xing Pei's attitude was completely different from before. He quickly cupped his hands and said, "Wang Yi must be joking. Your Majesty wouldn't have a secret decree. This old man is only worried about Wang Yi and is only saying this for Wang Yi's sake. After all, the Tiger Army is filled with Wang Yi's direct subordinates." Peng Shao paced back and forth in the tent, the horsewhip in his hand creating a loud and clear sound. "In this battle, we are going to fight to the death with Dian. Your Majesty is determined to conquer Dian. When we conquer Dian in the future, don't tell me you want all the cities to die and all the wastelands to be destroyed." Xing Pei, Huzi, and the other soldiers in the tent all looked at Peng Shao. Peng Shao stood at the head of the tent and held the hilt of his sword as he said, "This king has made this decision in order to prepare your Majesty to rule Dian in the future. The Yan Emperor is muddle-headed, and the people have been living under oppression and hunger for many years. Coupled with the years of war, they will need someone to end this chaotic world. If our people are worse than their dying people, what do you think the people will do?" Wang Yi is wise. Everyone understood and cupped their hands in admiration. Peng Shao nodded and said, "Everyone has worked hard today. You can all go and rest." "Yes." The generals bowed and left. Soon, only Peng Shao and Huzi were left in the tent. Huzi smiled and came up to help Peng Shao take off his armor. "Wang Yi, I just ordered people to prepare hot water. You should quickly take a bath. Is there any news from the capital?" Peng Shao asked as he nimbly took off his blood-stained battle robe, revealing his well-dressed upper body. He wore black silk pants and walked behind the screen. Immediately, there was the sound of water. Huzi rolled up his sleeves and helped Peng Shao wash his hair and wipe his back. "There has been no news from Ji Yun for a while. Our spies just sent news. Wang Yi was busy fighting, so I did not say anything." Peng Shao spread his arms and rested them on the edge of the wooden tub. He closed his eyes and said, "There is no news from Ji Yun. This means that the family Qin situation is very tense. With old dog Yuchi's temper, he might take his anger out on the family Qin as soon as he learns that we have started fighting here. Grand Tutor Qin might not be able to keep his position, and his life might even be in danger. On the other hand, the Chao family." Peng Shao paused for a moment before continuing, "Old dog Yuchi might not be able to do anything. He even wants to use the Taiden, which has no connection to him. The Chao family will definitely be revived." Huzi took a handkerchief and wiped Peng Shao's back. He said with admiration, "Master really knows things like a god." The spy's reply is just as you analyzed. The Chao family will be revived, and he will be made the crown prince's grand tutor again. Lord Qin will be stripped of all his positions, but he will keep his title and be thrown into the Ministry of Justice's prison. We sneak attack the right sentry of their 5th Army camp, scaring the commoners into running into the city. The Dog Emperor is still unwilling to give money to support them." At this point, Huzi said with some apprehension, "And 4th young miss, that, if you have something to say, just say it. Why are you acting like a woman?" Huzi secretly rolled his eyes and thought to himself, "Don't be angry if I say it." Then he told Peng Shao everything about how Qin Yining sold the treasures in Ning Garden and how to settle the refugees. Peng Shao was silent. Huzi silently continued to wipe Pang Zhao's back, not daring to say a word. He secretly guessed that Wang Yi was about to explode in anger. Who knew that after a moment, Pang Zhao would burst out laughing. "Io, could it be that His Highness has become muddle-headed from anger?" Pang Zhao said, "Sister Yi is so good at spending money. It seems that this king has to think of a way to save more money for his wife. Otherwise, when he marries her, what will he do if he doesn't have enough money?" "Huzi, tomorrow, give the order to capture all the corrupt officials in Xihua City, as well as the heartless local tycoons who have been labeled by the people as skinless, King of Hell, Monsang, and so on, as well as the dangerous people who resist particularly fiercely. Take them outside and behead them in public. Their property will all be used as the army's pay. Then, find a way to exaggerate the news and spread it to the capital of Dian." Huzi was stunned. "Wang Yi, didn't you just say that you want the people of the Yan dynasty to think that Dezhou is benevolent? This king has his reasons. Just do as he says." Chapter 194. Miss. Something bad has happened. The sound of hurried footsteps came from the courtyard. Qin Yining, who was dressing up in the attic, frowned slightly. She was still holding a jade pearl earring that she had not had time to put on. She stood up and leaned against the lattice window to look downstairs. "What's the matter? Why are you making such a big fuss?" A little girl stood in front of the door with a flushed face. Her hands were on her knees as she panted heavily. She looked up at Qin Yining and said while panting, "Xihua City has fallen. It said that little Wang Yi has killed many, many people. He even chopped off their heads and hung them on high poles to show the people. Now, it's chaos outside. All the people are running away. Our heads will be hung on the pole." As the little girl spoke, she leaned against the door sill and fell to the ground. She was so frightened that she started to cry loudly. The expressions of everyone in the courtyard changed. Some of the maidservants and grannies hugged their heads and cried in fear. Qin Yining slowly closed the window and sat in front of the dressing table. She looked at her face in the bronze mirror and did not speak for a long time. Had this day finally arrived? Although she had already guessed this, when it really happened, Qin Yining still felt that it was unreal. Her heart was hanging high and she felt empty. Bing Tang and Song Lan's faces were already pale. Qiu Lu was trembling uncontrollably. Half of the tea in her hand was shaken out of her hand. Only Ji Yun was still calm. She took the jade pearl earring from Qin Yining and put it on for her. Then, she took a white jade flower hairpin and put it in her hair. She hesitated and said, "Miss Wang Yi, he..." Qin Yining smiled bitterly and gently waved her hand to interrupt Ji Yun's words. She said faintly, "I know. It's not his fault. This is war, not a child's play. Even if the Dian soldiers had the chance to rush into Dezhou, they would do the same. This is not a person's fault, but the fault of the war. I just wonder when these days will come to an end." Ji Yun lowered her head when she heard this. Her heart was moved and sad. The mountains and rivers were about to be shattered. No one would feel good if this kind of hesitation and helplessness fell on them. It was rare that her miss could face this matter calmly and rationally even though she was sad. Song Lan said with a trembling voice, "Miss, what should we do?" "There's nothing we can do. We can only take one step at a time." Qin Yining stood up and took a few deep breaths to force herself to be alert. She said, "Let's go to Xingning Garden first. It's almost time to go back. No matter how chaotic it is outside, we still have to go on." "Yes." The maidservants saw that Qin Yining was not panicking, so they also calmed down a little. On the way to Xingning Garden, Qin Yining saw that all the servants and maidservants looked as if a great disaster was about to befall them, as if their parents had died. Marquis Anping's residence was already like this. It was easy to imagine what the streets would be like. As usual, she listened to the maidservants, dealt with some matters in the residence, and received cards. Qin Yining saw that a few maidservants were hesitant and seemed to have something to say. She had already guessed most of it in her heart. "Mama Li, Mama Fong, do you have something to say?" Hearing Qin Yining's question, all the stewards, older female servants and daughters-in-law stopped leaving. Mama Li and Mama Fong hesitantly came forward and bowed. Mama Li's temperament was more gentle and soft, while Mama Fong was more ferocious. She immediately smiled and said, "Miss is indeed wise. This servant does have something to say, but I don't know if it's appropriate to say it." Qin Yining smiled and said, "Mama Fong, there's no harm in saying it." Mama Fong said, "It's like this. I have a nephew in the south. In the past 2 years, his business has flourished and he wants to bring our family over to develop there. He's scheduled to leave in a few days. As for me, I'm a servant of the residence and I'm worried that it won't be good for me to leave at the last minute. However, I also want to reunite with my nephew in the south, so I'm a little hesitant." Qin Yining heard this and nodded in understanding. The maidservants in the room all cautiously peeked at Qin Yining's expression. Qin Yining's fair fingers gently stroked the edge of the lid of the bowl. After a while, she said, "Mama Fong is an old servant in the residence. She has worked hard for the family. Now that there's such a good place for her to go, how could the host not let her go?" Mama Fong was overjoyed when she heard this. She hurriedly placed the matching tile she had just received back on the square table next to Qin Yining's hand and turned to leave. Qin Yining looked at Mama Fong's back. She raised her beautiful eyes and looked at the other maidservants. Many of them instinctively looked away, not daring to meet Qin Yining's eyes. "What about you? Is there anyone who has other arrangements at home? Would you like to resign now?" Mama Li stammered when she heard this. "Miss, my daughter and son-in-law are also in the south. They also want to bring me over to retire." "Yes. Mama Li is getting on in years. It is indeed time for you to retire." Hearing Qin Yining's words, everyone felt that there was hope. 4 or 5 people suddenly stood up and said that they had family matters to attend to and could no longer work. Those who sold their bodies wanted to redeem themselves and release their contracts. Those who sought refuge also wanted to bid farewell. Bing Tang, Song Lan, Chiu Liu, and Ji Yun, who were standing beside Qin Yining, all had extremely ugly expressions. What family matters? It was obvious that these people wanted to pack up and run away when they saw that the situation was bad. Normally, the family treated them well. Now that they were in danger, they didn't even care about the benefits they received from their masters. They only wanted to run for their lives. Qin Yining was exceptionally calm. She nodded slightly and said, "Since that's the case, I have a plan in mind. Since it's still early today, why don't we do this?" Qin Yining stood up and ordered, "Immediately call all the servants in the inner residence to gather at the large open space in front of the back garden. Tell them that I have something to say." The nannies in charge complied and immediately rushed out. Qin Yining then told Song Lan, "Go to the outer courtyard and see if my father is home. If he is, ask him to come here. If he isn't, ask second uncle, third uncle, eldest cousin, or second cousin to come here." "Yes." Song Lan also quickly ran out. After everyone left, the bright parlor immediately quieted down. Only Qin Yining and the 3 maidservants were left. Sun Clan, who had been listening from behind for a long time, finally couldn't hold back anymore. She quickly walked out and pulled Qin Yining's hand, saying, "Sister Yi, what should we do? Dezhou has occupied Xihua City. I think these nannies in charge are simply going to quit. Once they leave, our whole family. Qin Yining patted Sun Clan's arm comfortingly and said with a smile, "Mother, don't worry. You can't force a cow to drink water, right? Today, we can take advantage of this opportunity to make things clear. The situation is tense now. If there are too many people, it won't be good for our family. Simplifying things a bit is a good thing." When Sun Shi heard this, she finally nodded her head. Not long after, everyone heard the news. Chapter 195. The servants set up round chairs and helped their masters to sit down. Qin Huayuan, second old master, and third old master sat next to old madam at the head of the table. Second old madam and third old madam also led their servants to stand or sit behind old madam. It seemed that they simply wanted to let go and let Qin Yining handle this matter alone. The servants gathered in the open space all lined up according to their positions. There were so many people, but no one dared to make a sound. The scene was so quiet that it didn't seem like the inner residence of a large family servant girls. It was more like a well-trained military camp. Qin Yining held a begonia-shaped silk fan in her hand and stood in front of the crowd while gently waving it. Her beautiful eyes swept over all the stewards, mamas, and daughters-in-law, as well as the people they brought. In our inner residence, there are a total of 243 people, from the return office of the second gate to the rear corner gate's gatekeeper, regardless of rank or age. Are they all here now? Steward mamas and sisters-in-law, first take a look and see if the people under your command are all here. When Qin Yining said 243, the expressions of old madam and Sun Clan's people behind her changed. They had been in charge of the household for so many years, but they actually didn't pay attention to how many servants there were in the residence. They actually didn't know this exact number. Old madam wasn't very happy at first. After all, Qin Huayuan had already returned. If it was to let Qin Yining control the situation in the residence, she wouldn't take a detour. But now that Qin Huayuan was at home, she didn't need to be in charge of the household, right? However, Qin Huayuan didn't say anything, Qin Yining didn't ask to resign, and old madam couldn't put down her face to compete with her granddaughter. Therefore, she could only continue to tacitly accept Qin Yining's identity as the young miss of the household. Now, seeing that Qin Yining was still not afraid to talk to all the servants in the inner residence, and that the servants didn't even dare to say a word of nonsense when they saw her. In addition, Qin Yining also confirmed it. Old madam knew that Qin Yining wasn't just bluffing. She really had the ability to be a housekeeper. At this point, old madam really had some thoughts of enjoying life in peace in the future. In just a moment, the steward mamas and daughters-in-law each counted their people and told Qin Yining. Qin Yining nodded and said, 4 people are missing. Go back and tell them what I said today. Yes, please give your orders, Mississippi Mama smiled. Then, Qin family will not treat you all. You all, family, to the family, and you all. Family. And daughter-in-law. 2. Early this morning, a few of you came to me to resign, so I might as well gather all of you here today to make things clear. 2. Now that we're all here, it's fate to be master and servant. There's no need to quarrel over the issue of leaving or staying. Today, I'll tell everyone the truth. If you follow the family Qin, then you must follow the path of the family Qin. If the family Qin eats sweets, then everyone eats sweets. If the family Qin suffers hardships, then everyone also suffers hardships. If you all want to leave, or if you have arrangements outside, or if you have relatives in the south to seek refuge with, then you can step forward now. As soon as he finished speaking, the scene was silent. No one stood out. Qin Yining smiled and said, everyone, there's no need to be embarrassed. We're not trying to settle accounts with anyone. If you want to leave, I won't ask for your ransom. Instead, I'll give each person 2 taels of silver as travel expenses. If you step forward now and register, then you can receive your money. Seeing Qin Yining's gentle expression and serious attitude, and thinking about the chaos outside, there were already people who couldn't take it anymore. They stepped forward hesitantly and silently stood in the empty space to the side. In the face of a disaster, it was a matter of life and death. Once someone took the lead, there were others who followed. 1, 2, 3, more and more people left the group and stood in the empty space to the side. Not only were there people who returned to the administrative office and the small kitchen, but there were also the head maidservants of the various branches and courtyards. For example, the head maidservant of the 6th young miss and the wet nurse of the 8th young Mississippi. Qin Yining watched quietly. He saw that the original group was becoming thinner and thinner, and the people standing in the empty space to the side were gradually unable to stand. The original group shrank. After careful counting, there were less than 40 people who were willing to stay. When the masters of the family Qin behind Qin Yining saw this, they couldn't help but feel a mixture of emotions and a chill in their hearts. Especially those personal attendants who actually chose to leave. For example, the 6th young miss and the 8th young miss were already silently shedding tears. Even the servants who chose to leave lowered their heads and blushed when they saw their masters like this. There were also some who quietly wiped away their tears. When Qin Yining saw that everyone had already stood still, he said, "Is there anyone else who wants to leave? If you take advantage of this moment to leave, you will be able to earn traveling expenses. If you choose to stay, then you will have to advance and retreat together with the family Qin." As soon as he finished speaking, another maidservant hesitated and went to the other side of the group. Qin Yining waited for a while. When he saw that no one else made a choice, he nodded and said with a smile, "During this period of time, I'll have to trouble everyone to take care of me." Ji Yun. After Qin Yining gave the order, Ji Yun led a few manservants out with a basket. Qin Yining said, "Now, stand in line. Come to the front and each of you will receive 2 taels of silver for your traveling expenses. After you return your indenture agreement or document of seeking refuge, you can go back and tidy up your clothes before leaving." When the basket was opened, the silver light inside was so dazzling that people couldn't look directly at it. Qin Yining stood beside the box and watched the steward register. She would often remind him, "Master," he often said, "after you leave, try to head south. If you have relatives in the South Sea, that would be the best place to go. Xihua City is currently in chaos. If you can avoid going north, try not to go north. If you really can't, find a place in the suburbs of the capital to ensure your safety." They had never seen a master like this. When faced with people who wanted to seek refuge, it was fine if they could calmly send them away. However, when those who had sold themselves to the family Qin wanted to leave, it was a bloody betrayal. The master was actually so benevolent. Not only did he not pursue the matter, he even gave them traveling expenses and told them where was the safest place to go. For example, Mrs. Fong and Mrs. Li, who had lied and said they wanted to leave at the beginning, when they heard Qin Yi's tireless reminders, they felt as if they had been slapped in the face a few times. They felt ashamed and touched. In this way, a large number of people were dismissed, but no one had any complaints about the family Qin. When the silver was distributed, everyone knelt down and kowtowed to Qin Yining and the family Qin master behind Qin Yining. Qin Yining waved his hand and said, "After today's farewell, we will be separated from each other. Everyone, please take care of yourselves. We will all be safe. Thank you, 4th Mississippi. Thank you, Marquis." Everyone kowtowed again and again, expressing their thanks in a lively manner. After a while, these people finally left. Qin Yining then turned to face the 39 people who were willing to stay. "If you are willing to stay and advance together with the family Qin will not doubt your loyalty and will not forget your intentions. Everyone, don't worry. As long as the family Qin still exists, we will protect you. As long as the family Qin has food to eat, we will never let you starve. From now on, we are one family. We will prosper together and suffer together. These words caused everyone's emotions to surge. Upon seeing this, Qin Yining also smiled. All right, everyone, come to the front and register. Everyone will receive 10 taels of silver. Afterwards, I will rearrange your tasks. With such a large family, there are still many things that we need to rely on you for. Among the people who were willing to stay, there were elderly women, young maidservants who didn't have hair, and also maidservants and mamas who served the madams and young misses. When they saw how Qin Yining treated those people, they were already moved. They felt that a master like the family Qin was so humane and worthy of their trust. Now that they heard Qin Yining's words and saw that he was so generous to reward them with 10 taels of silver each, they were even more delighted and felt that their decision was correct. Qin Yining rearranged these 39 people's tasks. For example, Mammy Qin was still serving the old madam. Ji Xiang and Ru Yi weren't willing to leave. In addition to serving the old madam, they also had to do some needlework and prepare a small kitchen to serve the old madam's meals. There was already so much work to begin with. Even if it was simplified, the work that everyone had to share would increase. However, Qin Yining's words had entered their hearts. He gave them more rewards and increased their monthly salaries. Therefore, everyone was full of energy. After this matter was settled, Qin Yining sent people to do their own tasks. Only then did he return to the old madam and Qin Huayuan. Father, you won't blame me for acting on my own, right? Qin Huayuan raised his eyebrows and smiled. Why would I blame you? I feel that we have a tacit understanding. Just now, your second uncle, third uncle, and I were outside discussing how to simplify the staff and the residents. You, on the other hand, were swift and decisive. We haven't decided yet, but you had already finished the work in a short time. This saved us a lot of trouble. Isn't that so? We have to leave those men who are also working in the residence. In a while, I will go to the outer courtyard and release a group of people according to Sister Yi's method. Third Old Master said. The old madam looked at her sons and then looked at Qin Yining. She said, such a big family. Can it still be supported if so many people are missing all of a sudden? Qin Huayuan held the old madam's hand and said with a smile, Mother, times have changed. Now, our family is no longer the same as before. Son's next step is to think about how to arrange for the residents of the family to be more concentrated. This way, it will be easier to guard the courtyard. Upon hearing this, second old master agreed and said, each branch doesn't need to be particular about which courtyard to live in. It's better for everyone to squeeze together and live in the courtyard near Ci Shao Garden. Third madam smiled and said, I have my eyes on the large building in the back of the old madam's courtyard. I want to live there soon. Old madam, don't be reluctant to part with it. The old madam couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 196. The Shuoran study was Qin Huayuan's residence before he got married. The collection of books there was very precious, and it was right next to the back garden. It could be said that every window opened was a beautiful view. It was an incomparable honor to be able to live in the Shuoran study. Who would have thought that Qin Yining would be willing to share such a precious place and take the initiative to ask her sisters to live together? Qin Huayuan smiled with satisfaction. Sister Yi, that's a good idea. Seeing that Qin Huayuan had also nodded his head, the girls all became happy. Miss Lu pursed her lips awkwardly. She didn't find Qin Yining as annoying as she used to. Miss Lu and Miss Lu both smiled happily and thanked Qin Huayuan and Qin Yining. Miss Lu grabbed Qin Yining's hand and wouldn't let go. That's great. I already knew that fourth sister's place has a beautiful view and a lot of books. I don't want to live in an empty room. I want to live with fourth sister. Fourth sister also has a very cute little bunny. I want to touch the bunny too. Third madam burst into laughter. You little girl, I gave you an inch and you wanted a mile. Miss Lu blushed and stuck out her tongue in embarrassment. However, Qin Yining liked Miss Eight's straightforward and romantic character very much. She shook Miss Eight's hand and said, "Why can't I? If you like, we can live together." Then she smiled at Miss Lu and said, "Sixth sister and seventh sister, you can choose which room you want to live in later." Okay. Miss Lu beamed and nodded. Miss Lu, on the other hand, quickly looked up at Qin Yining and stammered, "Fourth sister, you haven't told me where Miss Huining lives." This was the first time Qin Yining heard Miss Lu call her fourth sister in such a straightforward tone. In the past, she and Qin Huayuan were on the same page and disdained this savage sister of hers the most. Now that she saw Miss Lu's expression and realized that she was still thinking about her good sister, she couldn't help but find it funny. After all, they were all young girls. Even if they had some devious thoughts, they wouldn't be so dark in their bones. However, she would not easily forgive someone like Qin Huining, who was so black in the bones that no medicine could save her. Sixth sister, I understand what you mean. But Huining Miss is a guest, and the rooms in my master's study are limited. If we live together and bring our own servants, I'm afraid we won't be able to squeeze in. The sixth young mistress pursed her lips. She knew that back then, in order to frame eldest aunt, Qin Huining had actually made a voodoo doll to harm the old madam. At first, she felt that she could understand Qin Huining's actions. However, after Qin Huining went to the farmstead, she heard concubine Mother Lin say several times that Qin Huining wasn't a good person and that he was using her as a tool. She had already begun to have doubts about Qin Huining's character. Later on, she discovered that without Qin Huining at home, her days were much more peaceful. Even her mother, who didn't like her, began to treat her kindly. Now that she had calmed down and witnessed so many things in the manor, she had a new understanding of Qin Yining, who Qin Huining called a barbarian, untalented and uncultured, mean and harsh to her sisters. She didn't feel that Qin Yining was as abominable as Qin Huining made him out to be. Although she didn't really like Qin Yining, she didn't hate him either. At the very least, she was still a person of flesh and blood who cared deeply about her family. Thus, when she heard Qin Yining's words, the sixth young mistress surprisingly didn't refute him. Everyone was a bit surprised by this. Second madam was very satisfied with her concubine's daughter's performance. She smiled and said, "This is very good. You sisters can live together and be close to each other. It can't be better if you can discuss things with each other." The most important thing was that everyone would gather together and not be separated like before. Not only would it be more convenient for the guards to protect them, if there were any sudden problems, they would be able to take care of each other in time. Qin Yining nodded. Qin Huayuan, second master, third master, first master Yu, and second master Han also began to discuss where they would live. Third master, third madam, and the concubines would live separately in Ci Shao Garden's rear courtyard. Second master, second madam, and the concubines would live in the east wing and side rooms of Ci Shao Garden's front courtyard. The 14-year-old fifth young master Qin Ding and his three younger cousins would live in the west wing of Ci Shao Garden's front courtyard. Qin Han and Qin Yu had both married, so the young couple would each live in the east and west wing of Ci Shao Garden's rear courtyard. Qin Huayuan and the members of the Sun clan would live in the side rooms to the east of the old madam's main room. Chao Yuqing was also arranged to live in the side rooms to the west. The young ladies would live in the Shuoran Pavilion, which was separated from Ci Shao Garden by a small road. This way, they wouldn't collide with each other. Qin Huayuan thought for a moment, then called Qin Yining to the side and said, "Now that the whole family is gathered together and Qin Huaining is allowed to come back, why don't you give her a place to live in the Shuoran Pavilion? If it wasn't for me instructing her birth father to come to the capital, perhaps her birth father wouldn't have been trampled to death by the refugees." Qin Yining was shocked upon hearing this. "You're saying that Qin Huaining's birth father is dead?" And Qin Huayuan said in a low voice, "I specially ordered people to search along the way and have already collected her birth father's body." Although her birth father was that kind of person and didn't have any feelings for Qin Huaining, if it wasn't for my instruction, she wouldn't have lost her birth father. In the end, I still feel a bit guilty towards her. Moreover, we're in a time of crisis right now. She's been surnamed Qin for more than 10 years. As your father, I don't want to throw her out to fend for herself. I know her character isn't good and you're worried that she'll lead the other sisters astray. However, with you here, she won't be able to make any waves. If she makes a mistake again, you should punish her. If not, I'm still here. All right. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. As long as father doesn't hate for me to punish her, then I'll listen to your arrangements. Qin Huayuan couldn't help but laugh. Do you think you'll let her off lightly if I don't allow it? Right now, the world is in chaos. I don't want to deliberately make things difficult for her. As long as she knows her place and everyone keeps up appearances, it's fine. The father and daughter were chatting and laughing here. The two of them looked alike. If Qin Yining were to wear men's clothing, she would simply be a young version of wise Panin. The current scene was different from the scene of father and son reprimanding each other, where one of them was strict and the other lowered her head to answer. The Sun clan couldn't help but smile as they watched from the side. Second Madam and Third Madam were also envious and began to quietly tease them. When the father and daughter returned from their discussion, Third Madam smiled and said, "What are the father and daughter planning now?" Qin Huayuan smiled. "They're discussing with Sister Yi about arranging for Sister Hui to also live in the Shuoran Pavilion." Sister Yi was soft-hearted and agreed. As soon as he said this, everyone looked at Qin Yining in a different light. If other people's fathers encountered this kind of situation, they would probably just give a few instructions and leave it at that. However, Qin Huayuan only made this decision after discussing it with Qin Yining. It could be seen how much he cherished and respected this daughter of his. In addition, Qin Yining had recently shown her skills in managing the household and her sensitivity to political affairs. Not only did Second Madam and Third Madam think highly of her, but even her cousins also naturally looked up to her now. Everyone made arrangements to bring the people to move first. Third Master also hurried to the front courtyard to make arrangements for the servants to stay and to work. Right at this moment, the young maidservant, who was newly arranged to work at the second gate, rushed in. "Marquis, Marquis. Someone from the palace has come to pass an oral order. His Majesty has ordered you to enter the palace immediately." The originally relaxed and happy scene was suddenly splashed with cold water by this sudden sentence. Everyone's expressions were very unsightly. Old Madam anxiously grabbed Qin Huayuan's hand. "Brother Meng, His Majesty, what does His Majesty want to do now? If you don't go, we won't go." Qin Huayuan comfortingly patted Old Madam's arm and said with a sigh, "His Majesty's oral order. How can I go against it?" In reality, he had already guessed that the Emperor would definitely look for him now that Shihua City had fallen. Qin Huayuan turned around to look at Qin Yining. Qin Yining said, "Father, don't worry. Leave the house to us. Please come back soon." "All right." Qin Huayuan smiled with relief, then turned around and left the inner residence. The womenfolk looked at each other in dismay, their hearts hanging in the air. Qin Yining was also worried, but he couldn't show it on his face. He only made arrangements for the people to move and personally led people to patrol the inner residence. He counted the things that weren't in use in the courtyard, locked them up, rearranged which kitchen to use, and arranged how the servants should be on duty, and other miscellaneous things. While Qin Yining was busy, Qin Huaiyuan had already changed his clothes and entered the palace. In the imperial study, the emperor fiercely threw the reports from the front lines to the ground with a heavy expression. Rice bucket, rice bucket. You're all a bunch of idiots who eat for nothing. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. What's the use of raising a bunch of rice buckets? The emperor was furious. Guizhong Chao, Qin Huaiyuan, Yu Qiyan, and Prince Ning all knelt down in unison and saluted, "Your Majesty, please calm down." The eunuchs were already scared witless and hid in the courtyard. They didn't dare to approach for fear of being implicated. Calm down. How can I calm down by raising a bunch of idiots who don't do proper work? Peng Zhishi is simply a bastard. On our Dian, I treated him to good food and drinks, but he actually turned around and led his troops to attack us. He said that the Taitan people came to assassinate us. I think he's just using this opportunity to pick a fight. Qin Meng. This official is here. Qin Huaiyuan kowtowed in response. I told you to go negotiate, and this is how you negotiate. Can't you see that those scum from the Zhou dynasty are trying to cheat us of our money? Look, Xihua City has been occupied. Our east, north, and west roads have a total of 300,000 soldiers, but they were defeated by the Tiger Army's 100,000 soldiers. Is this because my generals don't know how to lead troops? Are you the only one in the world who knows how to lead troops? I think you're to blame for all of this. Since the start of the negotiation, you've made one wrong step. Now, every step is wrong. You still have the nerve to kneel here. The emperor became angrier as he spoke. He stood up and walked around the Polonia table covered with a bright yellow tablecloth. He rushed in front of Qin Huaiyuan and kicked him in the shoulder, sending Qin Huaiyuan rolling on the ground. Imperial Father. Yu Qiyan hurriedly supported Qin Huaiyuan. Imperial Father, please calm down. The people of Dezhou are crafty and crafty. Moreover, when we were negotiating, the Marquis of Anping had already reported the shortcomings to Imperial Father. It was only because of Imperial Father's decree that the Marquis of Anping signed the contract. Why is Imperial Father blaming the Marquis of Anping for all of this? The people of Dezhou are treacherous. What does it have to do with the Marquis of Anping? Aren't you afraid that your meritorious servant will be bitterly disappointed by your actions? Chapter 197. Pa! With a crisp sound, Yu Qiyan's face was slapped to one side. Blood immediately trickled down from the corner of his cracked lips. Yu Qiyan supported the kneeling Qin Huaiyuan with both hands. He looked up in disbelief at the angry and panting emperor. For a moment, it was as if he didn't recognize this person. When the emperor punished the crown prince, he would reprimand and confine him. If he punished him, he would never hit his face. A slap to the crown prince's face was equivalent to shattering all of his dignity and prestige. How could the crown prince convince the people in front of him in the future? But the emperor, who was shocked and angry, didn't care about this at all. In the emperor's eyes, other than resentment towards the incompetence of his officials, there was only fear of the Zhou dynasty invading the capital. What else was there? I think you've been the crown prince for too long. You've become arrogant. Now you dare to yell at me in front of important officials. If you become the emperor in the future, your tail will stick up to the sky. At that time, where will you put me? The emperor was still angry. He grabbed an inkstone and threw it at Yu Qiyan. Fortunately, Prince Ning was a step faster. He stretched out his hand and caught the inkstone, which was the size of an adult man's palm, preventing Yu Qiyan's head from exploding on the spot. She did not dare to wipe off the ink stains on her sleeves, so she could only kowtow again with her forehead on the ground. Imperial brother, please calm down. Rebel, rebel. The emperor pointed at Ning Wang and flew into a rage. Imperial brother, the crown prince was careless. Moreover, you only have one son. If you hurt his life, won't imperial brother be distressed? Ning Wang's advice was well-intentioned. The emperor originally didn't have many children. He only had the crown prince. If something happened to him in anger, who would inherit the throne in the future? But when the emperor heard this, he couldn't help but think about it. He looked at Ning Wang and wondered if he was mocking his ability in a certain area. Chao Guizhang saw that Ning Wang's words had distracted the emperor, so he brought the fire back to Qin Huaiyuan. Filled with righteous indignation, he said, Emperor, please calm down. The crown prince has a pure and honest heart. Today, he offended the emperor. It must have been instigated and misled by a scoundrel. I hope the emperor can understand. Instigated by scoundrels. Who was the crown prince close to? And who was the one who taught the crown prince a while ago? It went without saying who the traitor was. The emperor looked at Qin Huaiyuan and huffed with a dark expression. He pointed at him with a trembling finger. After a moment, he fiercely flicked his sleeve. In the end, he did not continue to scold him. He turned to look at Chao Guizhang. Guizhang contacted the Titan. Did he get any news? If there is still no news, I'm afraid the Zhou army will attack us. The emperor sat on the official's chair in frustration. Chao Guizhang's face turned ugly when he was questioned. He smiled apologetically and said, Your Majesty, this subject has already tried my best to persuade the Titan. It's just that something has happened to the Titan recently. What is it? I heard that the Titan Khan was assassinated by his only son a few days ago. What? His son killed his father. When the emperor heard this, he subconsciously looked at Yu Qiyan. Chao Guizhang nodded and said, Yes. It said that the Titan Khan took a fancy to his daughter-in-law and forced himself on her in public. His daughter-in-law was so ashamed that she committed suicide. His only son killed him in anger. Princess Ainari avenged her father and killed her brother. Now, the Titan court is in the hands of Princess Ainari. The three factions of the Titan court are currently fighting fiercely. This subject is worried that Princess Ainari won't have the time to send troops. When the emperor heard this, his brows tightly knitted together. It seems that that woman may not be able to hold on to that position steadily. Guizhang, why didn't you find a good person to contact? What can a woman do? The emperor impatiently complained. Chao Guizhang's face turned even uglier when he heard this. The emperor didn't have the ability. He didn't handle the matters of his own country well at a crucial time. He even needed to go all the way to Dezhou to ask the Titan for help. Now, he was complaining that the other party was a woman. Chao Guizhang sneered and said, Your Majesty, please calm down. Right now, it doesn't matter if the Titan ruler is a man or a woman. Our first priority is to convince them to send troops. Titan and Dezhou have been at war for many years. This old man doesn't believe that Dezhou's treasury can support both sides of the battlefield. Otherwise, they wouldn't have lied to us. The reason why Dezhou's emperor can attack us so fearlessly is because they have Jiziyu guarding the north. Without Jiziyu, the Tatars will definitely invade Great Zhou, and when that happens, Great Zhou will be attacked from both front and rear. With the valiant and fierce army of Great Yen, we will definitely be able to stop those Great Zhou soldiers outside the pass, and force them back to their own territory. Chao Guizhang's words were impassioned. The emperor's blood surged because of his words. It was as if he could already see Dezhou's flag fluttering above the cities that he had abandoned. It seems that I will have to trouble Guizhang to continue contacting the Titan. As long as they are willing to send troops, our crisis will be resolved. The emperor stroked his beard with satisfaction. Chao Guizhong cupped his hands in acknowledgement. Qin Huaiyuan's brows were tightly knitted as he listened. He disagreed and said, "Your Majesty, please listen to this subject's words. Although Chao Guizhong's analysis is reasonable, the Titan has a long way to go. Distant water cannot put out a nearby fire. Peng Zhishi's art of war is godly. He is good at using sly tactics. His 100,000 tiger army soldiers are all brave and skilled in battle. Now that they have occupied Xihua City, which is geographically close to the capital, with Peng Zhishi's bravery, if they wait for the Titan to send troops to divert the Zhou dynasty's attention, the Tiger army will probably invade. Right now, our eastern, western, and northern armies have a total of 300,000 soldiers gathered outside the city. In addition to the 5 barracks, 3,000 barracks, and the Godly Machine Battalion outside the city, we have a total of 350,000 soldiers. With our geographical advantage in the capital, if we choose an outstanding general to lead the troops, if the Tiger army directly attacks the city, it is not impossible for us to win with our 350,000 soldiers." Without waiting for the emperor to reply, Chao Guizhong said mockingly, "Oh. Then according to the Marquis of Anping, Peng Zhishi is the god of war who has descended to the mortal world and is indestructible. Our Dian dynasty has the true dragon, the son of heaven, and the protection of the heavens. Why should we be afraid of a young boy? I think the Marquis of Anping treats Peng Zhishi as his son-in-law and praises him as if he is a flower." Qin Huaiyuan looked at Chao Guizhong with a frown. It was useless to argue with him. He only said, "If Lord Guizhong has a problem with me, you can solve it in private. In any case, I still have to call you father-in-law. You can beat me or scold me, but please do not mix your personal feelings into the court. Now is the Dian's life and death situation. This is not a joke." "You," Chao Guizhong pointed at Qin Huaiyuan and was about to refute, but before he could say anything, he was interrupted by the emperor. "Stop arguing." Chao Guizhong and Qin Huaiyuan stopped talking and bowed. The emperor said angrily, "You can't handle serious matters well, but each of you is better than the other in bickering. I have raised you for so many years. Do you think I will see you fight among yourselves at critical times? Your Majesty, please calm down." Everyone bowed again. The emperor snorted coldly and said, "We will do as Guizhong says. Chao Guizhong, contact the Titan as soon as possible." "Yes." Chao Guizhong bowed and then smiled proudly at Qin Huaiyuan. The emperor then said to Qin Huaiyuan, "Seeing that you have been cautious and conscientious for so many years, I will spare you for now. Go back and think about your past." Qin Huaiyuan's face was pale. He stared at the emperor, and the light in his eyes gradually dimmed. Finally, he put his forehead on the ground and said solemnly, "This official obeys the emperor's order." Ever since most of the servants left the Marquis's estate and everyone gathered in one place to live, no one panicked in the face of disaster. Instead, they felt that the hearts of the family were more united. There were a total of 39 servants in the inner residence, and each of them was responsible for their own master. Qin Yining did not have to do anything sooner or later. If there was anything, he could let these people make decisions on the spot. As a result, Qin Yining felt that it was much easier to manage such a small family than it was to manage the great family of the past. Ever since Qin Huaiyuan returned from the imperial palace that day, he began to close his doors and not go out. He spent his days either reading in his room, admiring the flowers and scenery by the pond in the back garden, or fishing by his own pond with an umbrella. A day passed in such a leisurely manner. In these years, Qin Huaiyuan had never been so relaxed. This time, the war was tense and the city was in chaos. However, Qin Huaiyuan found a sense of freedom that he had not felt for many years. Qin Yining knew that Qin Huayuan was full of pent-up frustrations that could not be released, so she often brought her books to Qin Huayuan after finishing her work. Sometimes she would accompany him fishing, drink tea, and chat. Sometimes she would ask Qin Huayuan to explain the contents of her books to her. Qin Huayuan was much more knowledgeable than Qin Yining's teacher. Not only did he cite classics, but he could also often use existing matters in the imperial court as examples. Moreover, his language was witty and humorous. Qin Yining, who often listened to him, was intoxicated by his words. Father and daughter often sat under the awning in the garden pavilion or by the fish pond for an entire day. This year, the state is in chaos. Father is also busy. I did not manage to properly organize your birthday. For the time being, I will not be able to arrange your hairpin ceremony. Qin Huayuan sat on the cross-legged chair. Wearing a silk gown and a straw hat, he held a fishing rod in his hand and spoke with a smile. Upon hearing this, Qin Yining laughed and said, "In previous years, I did not celebrate my birthday. This year, on the 5th day of June, I ate longevity noodles. As for the hairpin ceremony, there is no hurry. In any case, before I turn 20, it will be the same no matter when I do it." Since ancient times, a girl could have her hairpin ceremony when she turned 15. However, it did not necessarily have to be held at 15. As long as it was held before she turned 20, it would be the same no matter when she did it. Qin Huayuan laughed and said, "That's true. It will be the same when you have your engagement ceremony." Engagement? Suddenly, Peng Zhao's masculine and handsome face appeared in Qin Yining's mind. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. In this situation, was it still possible for her and Peng Zhao to be together? "Miss, Mississippi." Song Lan trotted over from outside. Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan both smiled and looked over. Song Lan bowed and said, "Miss, Master Zhong is here. He is in the side hall right now." This servant saw that Master Zhong's expression was not very good. Upon hearing this, Qin Yining stood up and said, "Father, I will go and take a look. Perhaps it is about Ning Garden." Go ahead." Qin Huayuan responded lazily and continued to focus on his fishing rod. Chapter 198. When Qin Yining arrived at the side hall, Master Zhong was pacing around with a serious expression. When he saw Qin Yining enter, he immediately walked over and said anxiously, "Boss, something bad has happened." "What's the matter?" "Sit down and tell me slowly." Qin Yining led Master Zhong to a seat. Song Lan served them tea and left. Master Zhong didn't care about etiquette. He drank half a bowl of tea to soothe his throat, which was about to spit fire. Recently, there are more and more people running away from the city. The people who mortgaged their properties and shops to ask for a loan all abandoned their houses and ran away. I took people to go door to door to look for them, but none of them followed the rules. They only stayed to look after their houses. Most of them left letters and deeds for their houses and land. Qin Yining was stunned. He took a stack of letters from Master Zhong and flipped through them. The meaning of the letters was similar. Those people didn't care if the money they borrowed could cover the price of their shops and houses. Because there was an emergency at home, or because of other reasons, they were in a hurry to leave the capital. The money they borrowed was used by Qin Yining to buy their shops and houses. Those shops and houses belonged to Qin Yining. What was this? Forced to buy and sell. In peaceful times, where could he find such a good deal? Not to mention the dozens of house and land deeds in his hands, even if Qin Yining wanted to buy one of them, he would have to spend a lot of effort. According to the calculation method in peaceful times, Qin Yining got a great deal. But the problem was that in this world, a shop front wasn't worth anything at all. With the Tiger Army's brutal behavior in Xihua City, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't rush into the capital in the future. What if the capital was broken and the Tiger Army burned, killed, and looted in the city? Shops and houses were inanimate objects. These people fled with their families. They couldn't take their houses and land with them, but they could take their money with them. When they went to a new place, they could still count on the money to support their families. But what use did Qin Yining have for so many inanimate objects in the capital? They couldn't be eaten or used. If the people of Dezhou attacked, they would burn everything down. No wonder Master Zhong was so anxious. Qin Yining sighed faintly. This is the way of the world. It's useless to be anxious. Think on the bright side. At least we still have these shops and houses. In the past, if I had so many shops and houses, I wouldn't be able to use them all for the rest of my life. Master, you're still able to joke at this time. Great shopkeeper Zhong sighed and said, Boss, you haven't gone out to take a look these days. Not to mention that these merchants have foresight and have chosen to escape with the money in advance. Even the common people are selling their houses and land to leave. There are many large estates in the outskirts of the city that are selling to the outside world. But now that the world is in chaos, who doesn't know to save some money to escape? Who wants those crops that can't be eaten or used? Shopkeeper Zhong shook his head and pointed in the direction of the great Zhou dynasty as he cursed, Say, that group of bastards, how can they be so untrustworthy? We had a good negotiation and even signed the contract. We had to cede land and pay compensation so that the common people could have a few days of peace. Now that we've paid the money and paid the compensation, they actually turned hostile and refused to acknowledge us. Yes, our emperor is incompetent and muddle-headed, but the emperor is a bastard. What are the common people guilty of? Right now, the common people are selling their land to escape. I think it won't be long before they'll be selling their children, their daughters, and their wives. Qin Yining naturally knew what kind of life the common people were living in the chaos of war. Not only were the enemy troops abominable, those bandits who couldn't eat and became bandits were even more abominable than the enemy troops. They committed all kinds of crimes, burning, killing, and raping. It really scared people to the point where they didn't even dare to close their eyes when they slept. Otherwise, she wouldn't have had to hide in the mountains alone. Master Zhong, right now the world is so chaotic. Have you made arrangements for your family's affairs? Master Zhong nodded and said, I've already ordered my son to make arrangements for a retreat. That's good. Regardless of the outcome of this war, it's never a bad thing to make preparations in advance. Master Zhong, why don't you head south to lie low for a while? If the capital is safe, then it's naturally good. You can come back whenever you want. If something really happens, then you can avoid disaster. Right now, the capital hasn't reached the level of martial law yet. It's better to take advantage of this opportunity to leave quickly. If Dezhou's soldiers really come to the city, it won't be so easy to escape. Master Zhong is a smart person. He should have made arrangements for his family long ago. Shopkeeper Zhong nodded his head repeatedly, and said emotionally, It's rare for the owner to be so kind. This old man has heard from someone that the owner released the servants in the mansion, and gave them money to let them escape. Right now, many people praise the benevolence of the Marquis of Onping's manner. It's just that the emperor has eyes but can't see, treating the Marquis of Onping like that. Qin Yining waved his hand and said helplessly, Thunder and rain are all the grace of the emperor. My father is wholeheartedly loyal, so he naturally has to accept it. I just don't want to implicate innocent people. Since they've decided to leave, I don't need to force them to stay. Right now, since Master Zhong's family has been made arrangements, when the time is right, you should also leave the capital with your children. During this time, Master Zhong can start handing over the accounts to me. Master Zhong purposely didn't answer because he wanted to avoid this question. However, Qin Yining was wholeheartedly concerned about him, so he had no choice but to face the current situation. Master, it's easy for me to leave, but what about you? Me? Qin Yining smiled slightly. I am the daughter of the family Qin. Even if the sky collapses in the Dian, I will still stay in the capital to advance and retreat together with my father. Qin Yining stood up and walked to the back window. He looked at the lush green grass and the lush green forest outside. A few sparrows were perched on the grass, chirping happily. He didn't know if he would be able to see such a peaceful scene in the future. Thinking of the commoners in the city who had to run for their lives and had no money, Qin Yining thought for a moment and said, "Head shopkeeper, I have one last thing to trouble you with. After you make the arrangements, I can leave the capital with my family." Master Zhong asked in confusion, "What orders does Master have?" "The money I have, after using it to feed the refugees in Ning Garden, should still have some left, right?" Master Zhong nodded and said, "The property that Duchess Ding left for Master was a large sum. Master only spent 10,000 taels. Even if you use all your strength, how much can you use? Yes, it's good to have some left. Since the commoners in the city have sold their land and fled, Master Zhong, give the order to have people secretly purchase those lands." "What?" Master Zhong stood up in shock. "Master, the land they sold is the same as the houses left behind by the people who took out mortgages. It's useless to you. Once the city falls, those lands will become wastelands. At that time, we won't even know who the country belongs to, let alone those lands that no one cultivates. If Master spends this money, then it's all for naught." "I understand what the head shopkeeper is saying," Qin Yining turned around and said with a smile, "but I just don't want to benefit the Zhou dynasty's emperor." Master Zhong was stunned. If the Dian falls, the country will no longer be a country, and the family will no longer be a family. Not to mention my Zhaoyun agency, even the entire family Qin and the entire Yan dynasty's treasury will fall into the hands of the Zhou dynasty's emperor. I don't have the final say in the country's treasury. The family Qin doesn't have much money, and it's not up to me to decide. But my own money, even if I throw it away, I don't want to benefit the Zhou dynasty's emperor. Master. Master Zhong suddenly felt that his eyes were hot, his nose was sour, and his tears were almost flowing out. I definitely can't run away. Once the country falls, my things will become the Zhou dynasty's. While the money is still under my control, it's better to give it to the commoners to escape. It's also used on the commoners of the Yan dynasty, so it's not a waste. Otherwise, in the future, if the Zhou dynasty's emperor benefits for no reason, then my heart will really ache. Master is so righteous." Master Zhong cupped his hands in admiration. In an instant, he seemed to have made up his mind. "All right, since Master has decided, then leave this matter to me." Qin Yining smiled and said, "Remember, this matter can't be publicized. It has to be arranged step by step so that people can't find out that it's me. Why doesn't Master take this opportunity to gain more fame? You're really working for the commoners." Qin Yining pointed to the top of his head and said with a smile, "Don't forget, the emperor has been watching my Zhaoyun agency. If he finds out, won't he snatch it back in anger? Then we won't be able to do anything." Master Zhong was full of anger when he thought of the incapable emperor. But he was just a commoner, and there was no other way. The only thing he could do now was to maximize the use of Qin Yining's money. "All right, Master, don't worry. I'll definitely arrange it properly. Even if they investigate, they won't be able to trace it back to us. Thank you for your trouble, head shopkeeper. I think this matter will be completed in about 3 to 5 days. When the money has been spent, you can give me the deed to the house, land, and fields. Then you can leave with your family." Master Zhong looked at Qin Yining's sincere smile and shook his head. He cupped his hands in farewell and turned to leave. Qin Yining watched Master Zhong leave, then returned to the fish pond and continued to chat with Qin Huaiyuan. 5 days passed like this, and it was almost July. There was little rain this year, and the weather was hot. The sun was scorching day by day, and it was so hot that it made one's heart feel stuffy. On this day, Qin Yining hugged Airbai and was about to take an afternoon nap when Song Lan walked in quickly and said in a low voice, "Miss, Master Zhong is here." Qin Yining was stunned. He quickly got up, tied up his hair, and went downstairs. He went straight to the side hall in the front yard. Master Zhong's forehead was still covered in sweat, and his face was oily. In just 5 days, he had tanned a little, but he looked very energetic. "Why is head shopkeeper here at this time? Have you used up all the money?" Master Zhong said, "Master, someone wants to do a big business with us. I can't be sure, so I hurried over to pick you up." Qin Yining was stunned and said, "What kind of business can there be at this time?" Master Zhong's eyes were bright. Qin Yining could tell from his expression that he was excited. Chapter 199. Qin Yining asked curiously, "Who is it that wants to buy those useless stores?" Master Zhong's eyes shone with excitement. "Boss, come with me. You'll know when you see them." "Oh, right, you can only bring your trusted people with you." Qin Yining saw Master Zhong like this and couldn't help but narrow his eyes suspiciously. However, out of his trust in him, he still nodded and said, "All right, I understand." She only called for Bing Tang and Ji Yun. Then she and Master Zhong left the Marquis Fu and took a carriage to the north of the city. "Who is the head shopkeeper talking about?" Qin Yining couldn't help but ask curiously in the carriage. Master Zhong only smiled when he heard this. "Won't you know when you get there, boss?" His secretive and excited expression was completely different from the worried expression he had a few days ago. This made Qin Yining even more curious. Could it be that Master Zhong was just happy because someone wanted to buy the stores and residences that she had cheated? The carriage traveled the entire way and exited the inner city gates to the outer city. This place was much quieter than the inner city. On a summer afternoon, when the sun was high in the sky, the official road was covered in dust. Fortunately, when the carriage was moving, there was still wind blowing into the carriage to relieve some of the heat. Qin Yining lifted the curtains and looked outside. He could see people carrying backpacks or driving donkey carts in groups of 3 to 5 heading towards the inner city gates. These people were all covered in dust and had worried expressions. It was as if the sky was about to collapse. His originally light-hearted mood could no longer be lifted after seeing such a scene. In the face of war, people would truly understand how precious peace was. Just like the women in the family. In the past, they would be calculative with anyone for a bowl of bird's nest. They would ridicule each other when they saw each other. Now, they didn't care so much. It was as if they were trying their best to cherish the happy days. The whole family was very harmonious. Even Qin Huaining, who used to be the most troublemaker, had become gentle and quiet. Master Zhong saw Qin Yining's serious expression and guessed why she was upset. He could only remain silent. Not long after, the carriage stopped outside the wooden fence of a manor in a remote part of the city. Master Zhong got out of the carriage and carefully observed the surroundings. Seeing that nothing was out of the ordinary, he ordered the carriage driver to drive the carriage directly into the courtyard. After the wooden door was closed, Bing Tang and Ji Yun jumped out of the carriage and helped Qin Yining down. Qin Yining straightened out her skirt and asked with a smile, "Why did you choose such a place to discuss business?" "The other party's identity is special and it is not convenient to discuss in our building. However, don't worry, boss. I have arranged everything properly. Please come in. Master Zhong smiled as he led Qin Yining through the spacious courtyard toward the 3 thatched huts in the center. Bing Tang followed behind while fanning himself. Ji Yun was very alert and carefully observed the movements in the surroundings as they walked. Qin Yining was very familiar with this kind of house. When she was young, she would be extremely envious of any family who lived in such a neat house and had such a large courtyard. Although she had enjoyed life in the Marquis Fu for a while, the residence that left the deepest impression on her was the cave she lived in on the mountain and the thatched hut she built herself. Now, this manor's courtyard made her feel very secure. When they reached the door, Master Zhong first lifted the brown-yellow curtain made of coarse cloth. "Boss, please come in." Qin Yining nodded with a smile and stepped through the threshold. There was a wooden square table in the central room facing the door. There were benches and small stools scattered around the room. Brown-yellow curtains made of coarse cloth hung halfway in front of the door on the left and right sides of the room. Based on the shadows on the ground, there should be someone in the room on the right. As expected, Master Zhong went to the right. He said, "Sorry for disturbing you," in front of the door and lifted the curtain to invite Qin Yining in. Qin Yining did not suspect anything. Unexpectedly, as soon as she leaned in, a large hand suddenly reached out diagonally from the front and pulled her into an embrace. Before Qin Yining could cry out in alarm, she was pressed against the wall. Her eyes were covered and her lips were passionately covered. Qin Yining was really scared out of her wits. She punched the person in front of her with both hands and kicked her legs wildly. She could not stop whimpering for help. However, the person was very strong. His palm pressed her against the wall like an iron clamp. One of his legs pressed down on her, and her legs kicked wildly without any effort at all. What was even more frightening was that Master Zhong, Ji Yun, and Bing Tang outside the door did not react at all. However, the person in front of her was getting more and more eager. His strong tongue was trying to invade her mouth. In a moment of desperation, Qin Yining deliberately let go of her teeth. When the person's tongue reached over, she fiercely bit it. "Hiss! Are you trying to murder your own husband?" Qin Yining was stunned when she heard this. The large hands covering her eyes loosened. In a blur, she saw Pang Zhao's familiar long eyebrows and almond-shaped eyes. Under the high bridge of his nose, the corners of his captivating red lips were stained with blood. This person's face was very close to hers. Their breaths intertwined. He changed his grip and held her waist with both hands. Then, he bent down and kissed her fiercely on the cheek. "It's been so long since we last met that you can't even taste me anymore. It seems like I didn't leave a deep enough impression on you last time." Pang Zhao smiled mischievously and pressed his face against hers again. You. Qin Yining raised her hand and gave him a slap. "Paw." The crisp sound made Huzi, who was guarding the door, grin. Pang Zhao was not angry at all after the slap. He only felt that the person in his arms was fragrant and soft. She was like a warm, fragrant, and soft jade nestled against his chest. Even the way she stretched out her hand to slap people was extremely similar to the fluffy and soft air by. Her eyes, which were filled with anger and mist, were wide and round. Her eyelashes were fluttering. His heart melted just looking at her. No wonder there was a saying, "Spring nights are short and the sun rises high." From now on, the emperor will not attend court early. This kind of beauty was simply asking for his life. "Are you scared? Does your hand hurt?" Pang Zhao intimately rubbed the tip of his nose against Qin Yining's. Qin Yining was so angry that tears welled up in her eyes. Just now, she really thought that she had been set up. She thought that Master Zhong had somehow betrayed her and tricked her into handing her over to some evil person. Even now, her heart was still beating wildly in fear. Seeing that Qin Yining did not speak, Peng Xiao bent down to look at her carefully. When he saw that she was about to cry but was holding back her tears, Peng Xiao's heart ached terribly. He hugged her and shook her. "Did I really scare you? I was just teasing you. Why don't you hit me a few more times?" He grabbed her hand and pressed it against his stubbled handsome face. Then, hit me here. "I'll hit you, okay? Who wants to hit you?" Huzi, who was outside the door, shivered and had goosebumps all over his body. This shameless person who stretched his right cheek after being hit on the left was actually his Wang Yi. He could not bear to look at it. He immediately got up and pulled the red-faced Bing Tang to the side to talk. Ji Yun and Master Zhong also walked away awkwardly. Qin Yining took a few deep breaths, but she could not hold back her tears. Ever since they parted, first, she was almost eaten by the Empress. Then, there were all kinds of things happening at home. Her father was arrested, and she had to scheme in every possible way. She had to manage the household and take care of thousands of refugees. At the crucial moment, the servants in the residence even quit their jobs. Although she was adaptable and steady in her schemes, no one knew how tormented her heart was. Now that she was facing Peng Xiao, for some reason, the tight strings in her heart suddenly loosened. She was like a child who had been wronged. Her tears rubbed against his shoulder. Okay, don't cry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have scared you like this. How about you hit me? I'll hit you." Peng Xiao was flustered by her crying. He sat on the wooden bed at the side and hugged her to sit on his lap. He hurriedly wiped her tears. Chapter 200. Qin Yining's face turned red from the coarse clothes he was wearing. Only now did he notice what Peng Xiao was wearing. He was wearing an indigo coarse robe with patches on the sleeves. His hair was tied up in a bun at the back of his head. His hair was a bit messy, and he was carrying a tattered straw hat on his back. "You dare to come to the capital at a time like this?" Qin Yining stopped crying and angrily glared at him. Peng Xiao hugged her with one hand and held her wrist with the other. His thumb gently rubbed the red bean bracelet on her wrist as he smiled, revealing his white teeth. "I missed you, so I came to see you. Also, I came to do some business and save some money for my marriage." Qin Yining snorted. "Aren't you afraid that I'll hand you over right now? I don't know how much merit I'll get if I hand you over to our emperor. Are you willing to do that?" Peng Xiao brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. His blood-stained and slightly dry lips brushed against her fingers, and then the tip of his tongue swept across the bracelet on her wrist. That kind of soft and itchy feeling made Qin Yining's entire body tremble as if he had been scalded. "What are you doing? I haven't seen you in so many days, and I'm not even allowed to kiss you. To tell you the truth, if I had given you a choice, would you have sent me out?" Qin Yining stared at him with slightly red eyes. She had deliberately avoided this topic, didn't want to think about it, and didn't want to talk about it. How could he so calmly ask about it? Peng Xiao looked at those bright red eyes and sighed. "I'm just afraid that you're thinking too much. I know that because of your father, you've already forgotten how much suffering you've suffered outside. The country in your heart has never protected you, and the emperor in your heart is an incapable ruler. I know all of what you're saying." Qin Yining interrupted Peng Xiao's words and looked up at his face that was inches away from hers. "The emperor is incapable, and the country is corrupt. Do we deserve to be invaded by foreign enemies? Sister Yi, do you know what kind of life the common people are living now? Earlier, I sold all the valuables in Ning Garden and spent a lot of money. Only then was I barely able to support 1,800 people and prevent them from starving to death. But there are still so many commoners outside who have no home to return to. This year, the weather wasn't favorable, and there was no way to farm due to the chaos of war. Many people had to leave their homes. Now, everyone was selling their houses and land to escape. It wouldn't be long before there would be people selling their sons, daughters, and wives. This is all caused by you people from Dezhou. Peng Zhishi, I really should hand you over to the emperor. Qin Yining said ruthlessly, but he couldn't stop his tears from falling again. Pang Xiao kissed her forehead, held her in his arms, and stroked her hair with his big hands. If you were willing, I would have been handed over a long time ago. You have Miss Tang by your side, and she knows how to use poison. You are also resourceful, and I am not guarded against you. Don't you have many opportunities to harm me? Qin Yining gave up on herself and buried her face in his arms, refusing to say anything. If she was torn between her country's righteousness and her personal feelings, she would break down. But you have to know that the reason why I went to war was to end this chaotic world. Qin Yining's heart trembled when she heard this, and she raised her head to look at him. Pang Xiao wiped her face with his sleeve and said, the sooner we end this chaotic world, the sooner the common people will have a day of peace. Previously, when we were fighting Beiji, I thought this way. Now that we are fighting Dian, I still think this way. Once the world is unified, there will be at least 100 years of peace, right? Although many people die in war, for the sake of a day when the country is prosperous and the common people live in peace, the sacrifice now is nothing. The people who die are sacrificed for the sake of a better future for everyone in the world. Even if you want my life one day, I won't hesitate. Qin Yining lowered her eyes and leaned on his shoulder again, quietly thinking about what he said just now. Perhaps, for everyone in the world, it was best to unify the country and bring peace to the world as soon as possible. She thought that because she was from the Yan dynasty, she hated the invasion of the Dezhou people. But she didn't expect that Pang Xiao didn't go to war for plunder. He went to war for the whole world. He didn't care about his country, but the common people of the world. Qin Yining didn't doubt the truth of Pang Xiao's words at all. Compared to him, she was too narrow-minded. Pang Xiao saw that she was obediently leaning on him, and he knew that she didn't have the same resentment as before. With a beauty in his arms, it wasn't his style if he didn't take the opportunity to touch and kiss her. While she was thinking, Pang Xiao kissed her cheeks and snow-white neck. He buried his face in her hair and breathed in the faint jasmine fragrance on her body. He didn't want to raise his head. His hot breath fell on her neck, causing Qin Yining to come back to her senses. She quickly pushed him away and jumped down from his lap. She blushed and said, "It's such a hot day. Don't you think it's hot?" Pang Xiao was indeed very hot. All the heat in his body was rushing to a certain part of his body. It was very difficult for him to endure it, so he didn't stop her when she walked to the side. Qin Yining held the fan and waved it vigorously a few times. Then she suddenly remembered the purpose of her visit today. "You came to buy a shop?" "Yes. I originally sent people to the capital to secretly gather information and wanted to buy some property. Who knew that I would get in touch with Master Zhong?" Qin Yining narrowed her eyes and thought for a moment. She suddenly realized something and said, "You're too cunning." "What's wrong?" "The real situation in Xihua City must not be like the rumors in the capital. You didn't massacre the people in the city, right?" "Yes. I only killed some landlords who specialized in exploiting the people's wealth and corrupt officials who caused chaos. But you beheaded them in public and spread the news that you were about to massacre the people in the city." Qin Yining leaned over and patted his head with the fan. "You're so cunning. Aren't you trying to amass wealth? No wonder Master Zhong was so happy. You, the commander of the enemy army, are going to buy a house and buy property in the capital. That means that when you really attack in the future, you won't burn down houses and kill people. You'll ensure that the capital operates normally. Isn't that obvious?" Pang Shao laughed. I'm not a homicidal maniac. Do you think I'm going to war just to kill people? Conquering Dian and incorporating Dezhou into the territory of Dian was also to develop the economy and let the people live better lives. Pang Shao shook her head and clicked her tongue. It seems that you still don't know me well enough. You're actually affected by those rumors and slander and think of me as a murderous demon. Qin Yining said, You think that way, but it doesn't mean that your emperor thinks the same way. Pang Shao was silent for a moment. Both of them thought of the time when the emperor of Zhou ordered Pang Shao to massacre the people in the city. Pang Shao disobeyed the order and was stripped of his position as the Grand Marshal by the emperor of Zhou. Pang Shao supported his chin with one hand and looked at her with a smile. Are you worried about me? Qin Yining was stunned and her face turned even redder. No. Again, no. Qin Yining felt uncomfortable being stared at by him, so she simply turned around and looked away. Pang Shao was amused by her appearance and didn't want to provoke her anymore. He took her hand and said, Come, let's eat first. I've prepared food. Qin Yining said in surprise, You've prepared food. Chapter 201. Naturally, she knew about his past. After this person barged into her life in a domineering manner, she realized that she did not hate him and did not even want to reject him. Therefore, she tried to find out more about his past. She found out that he was forced to join the army and that he grew up under the protection of his grandfather's family. However, just because his grandfather owned a restaurant, it did not mean that Pang Shao knew how to cook. This tall man had always been domineering. If someone said that he knew how to scheme and kill, she would believe it. However, she could not imagine what this person would be like when he cooked. Pang Shao pulled her to the kitchen at the back. As soon as they reached the door, they could smell a special aroma. Is this beef? Yes. The weather is hot, so I prepared beef shank in advance. I boiled the soup and let it cool down. You can eat the cold noodles I cooked later. As they spoke, the two of them entered the kitchen. Qin Yining saw that there was a pot on the chopping board with a piece of dough inside. Pang Shao scooped some water from the pot and washed his hands. He lifted the wooden lid of the big iron pot and filled it with water. He smiled and said, Wait a moment. The stove is ready. We'll be able to eat soon. Qin Yining leaned against the door of the kitchen and watched Pang Shao neatly pull the noodles. Finally, he watched as his large hands stretched the noodles into even strips. The water in the pot was already boiling. Pang Shao pinched off the ends of the noodles and placed the even strips into the pot. The boiling water calmed down after the noodles were placed in the pot. Pang Shao stirred the water with a long spoon, then prepared 2 basins of cold water. She took out cucumbers and pears, washed them, and cut them into even slices. Then, she took out a piece of marinated beef from the pot and cut it into thin slices. She also cut a few slices of watermelon for later use. Qin Yining noticed that Pang Shao's hands and feet were very nimble, and his knife skills were also very good. It was obvious that he had done this often in the past, and he really did have the qualities of a chef. It didn't take long for the noodles to be ready. He soaked the noodles twice in cold water and put them into 2 rough but clean pottery bowls. He then took out the pot that had been soaking in the well water. Inside the pot was a bowl of beef cold noodle soup. Pang Shao picked out the scallions and ginger slices from the soup and poured the soup over the noodles. He then placed the shredded cucumber and pear slices evenly on the noodles. He then placed the triangular slices of watermelon and beef slices on the other side. Finally, he sprinkled some coriander and sesame seeds on the noodles and placed the noodles on the table in the outer room. Come, try my cooking. Pang Shao handed a pair of chopsticks to Qin Yining with a smile. Qin Yining was already stunned by Pang Xiao's nimble hands and the bowl of cold noodles in front of her, which looked, smelled, and tasted good. The noodles in the rough pottery bowl were finely balanced, and the fragrance of the broth assailed her nostrils. The color of the broth was clear, and the combination of the dark green shredded cucumber, snow-white shredded pear slices, red watermelon slices, and the tender beef slices made her feel appetizing. Qin Yining tasted a mouthful of the broth. It was refreshing, and there was no fishy smell of meat at all. Instead, there was a fragrance of vegetables, fruits, and marinated beef. She ate a mouthful of noodles. It was chewy, but not too hard. Moreover, the thin noodles were very tasty. She ate another mouthful of cucumber, pear, watermelon, and drank a mouthful of soup. Qin Yining felt that the heat of the summer had dissipated in these few mouthfuls of noodles. Before she knew it, she had eaten half a bowl of soup and noodles. Pang Xiao held a large pottery bowl in one hand and used a pair of chopsticks to eat the noodles. She couldn't help but look over the edge of the bowl to observe Qin Yining. Although she ate delicately, her eyes were curved into crescents, indicating that she liked the noodles very much. Pang Xiao felt even happier. Qin Yining had been worried about her family's affairs these days. In addition to the hot summer, she usually didn't have much of an appetite. This meal was the most filling she had ever eaten. However, the bowl was too big, so she still couldn't finish it. Pang Xiao saw that she only had half a bowl of noodles left. She put down her empty bowl and asked, "What's wrong? Is the noodles not to your taste?" "No, they taste very good. I like them very much. It's just that I can't eat anymore." Qin Yining looked at Pang Xiao with sparkling eyes. "I didn't expect your cooking to be so good. It's nothing. Time is tight, so I can only cook some noodles to fool you. When I have time next time, and I have all the ingredients, I'll cook something good for you." Pang Xiao naturally took the half bowl of noodles left by Qin Yining and started eating. Qin Yining raised her hand to stop her, but it stopped in mid-air. "That's my leftovers." Pang Xiao put down the bowl and smiled. "What are you afraid of? Have you eaten watermelon? It's been in the well for a while now. It's still cold." He got up and took a kitchen knife. In a few moments, he chopped the watermelon into several pieces. He turned back to look at Qin Yining, who was sitting on the bench as beautiful as a painting. He cut a few more times and handed a piece of watermelon that was just the right size for Qin Yining to bite. "Thank you." Qin Yining took the watermelon with both hands and took a bite. The weather was dry this year, so the watermelon with sandy pulp was extremely sweet. Pang Xiao sat on the bench opposite Qin Yining with his legs spread apart. He looked at her while eating the watermelon. His mouth was full, but he did not forget to smile at her even though his cheeks were puffed up. For some reason, Qin Yining's mood became especially light. His good appetite made him eat 2 more pieces of watermelon. After the meal, Pang Xiao fetched a basin of water for Qin Yining to wash his hands. He used the water that she used to wash his face. Qin Yining watched him from the side. He really had the illusion that they were a family, just an ordinary family. Pang Xiao wiped his face. The hair on his temples was wet, so he casually brushed it back and said with a smile, "Sister E, do you think my culinary skills are good?" Qin Yining nodded and praised him seriously. "Your culinary skills are excellent. You're even better than my family's cook. Compared to you, I'm much worse. To be honest, the only thing I'm good at is barbecued meat. Because I used to eat barbecued meat a lot, I learned a little when I went back, but it's barely edible." Pang Xiao laughed. "Don't be afraid. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to cook. I'll cook for you in the future." Qin Yining was infected by his smile and almost blurted out the word, "good." However, he immediately understood the deeper meaning of his words. His face immediately turned red. This man was willing to take the risk to visit her. He never put on Wang Ye's airs in front of her. He cared for her so much, was willing to eat her leftovers, and was willing to use the water that she used to wash. They were like a family. She might really be tied to him for the rest of her life. On second thought, in the eyes of outsiders, her reputation and integrity had long been given to this man. Besides, they had kissed and hugged. She really could only belong to him. Even if she didn't consider this, it would be difficult for her to repay him for saving her life several times. The more Qin Yining thought about it, the redder her face became. Even her neck and ears were completely red. Pang Shao couldn't help but laugh when he saw her like this. He pulled her into his arms. What's wrong with our sister Yi? Could it be that she's been cooked? Otherwise, why is she all red? Qin Yining chuckled and hit him. What are you talking about? I'm not a shrimp. Aren't you? Let me have a taste. Pang Shao smiled and pretended to bite her face, but she gently pushed him away. Stop fooling around. Don't we still have serious matters to attend to? There's no hurry. Since we know the origins of those shops, doing business will be easy. It wasn't easy for us to meet, and we don't know when we'll meet again. I can't always come to see you. The war is getting more and more intense, so it's even harder for me to come. Let me hug you for a while longer, okay? What is this person saying? He's simply shameless. What are you doing? We're not even married yet. So you're saying that as long as we get married, you can let me do whatever I want? Pang Shao looked at her with his bright phoenix eyes. Qin Yining was stunned and even forgot to struggle. After a while, she said, Who said I'm going to marry you? TSK. Our sister Yi is really a bad person. She ate my noodles and even took advantage of my tofu. Don't tell me you want to go back on your word. When did I take advantage of your tofu? Qin Yining's eyes widened. You're still saying you didn't eat it. Look, you've bitten my tongue. Now that you've fallen out with me, you want to deny it. My reputation has been ruined by you. If you're not willing to take responsibility for me, then what am I going to do? Qin Yining pushed his chest with both hands and looked speechlessly at his face that was so close to hers. This person's shamelessness really made her gasp in amazement. You should really let your subordinate see what their Wang Yi looks like when he's acting shamelessly. Qin Yining only said one sentence in the end. Pang Shao laughed heartily. Do you think all the men in the army are rough men? They left their homes to fight, and the people they owe the most are their mothers and wives at home. Our northern men are honest and love their families. Don't be fooled by how they act like little tigers outside. When they get home, they turn into cats when they see their wives. Each one is more henpecked than the other. I'm considered one of the better ones. Qin Yining was flabbergasted. She said, Don't tell me that the Tiger Army specializes in training henpecked men. You're considered one of the better ones. When they get home, do they have to kneel down like soybeans when they enter the house? Pang Shao didn't answer. He just lowered his head and looked at her with a smile. Qin Yining blinked and suddenly realized what she had said. She was so embarrassed that she exclaimed, Aya. She lowered her head and covered her face. Sister Yi, are you finally willing to treat me as your man? Pang Shao chuckled happily. His laughter was right next to her ear, and it made her heart tremble. His voice was deep and magnetic, and it made her face turn purple. She wished she could dig a hole and bury herself in it, but the corners of her lips couldn't help but curl up. Silly girl, remember this. I, Peng Jishi, will cheat anyone, but not you. I'm a man's man. If I say I want to marry you, I will definitely marry you. You don't have to think about the problems between you and me. What national enmity? What family hatred? If I can't even settle these things, how can I have the face to marry you? You just have to wait here quietly, do you understand? Our good days are still ahead of us. As Pang Xiao spoke, he planted a kiss on her forehead. Qin Yining leaned on his shoulder quietly and nodded obediently. I know. Pang Xiao kissed the top of her head again. You have to believe me and wait for me. Okay. I will wait for you. Chapter 202. It was getting late. Qin Yining had to return home. Pang Xiao, the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army, could not spend the night in the capital. He had to rush back to avoid delaying the military situation. It was already a great risk for him to come to the capital. In the courtyard, Huzi had already prepared the horses. Pang Xiao cupped his hands to Master Zhong and said, I've troubled you to take care of Sister Yi these days. It's hard for you to remain loyal to her in this situation. She is meticulous and loves to worry. If she didn't have someone as capable as you by her side, she might have encountered danger several times. I'm far away. Even if I have the heart, sometimes it's beyond my reach. I'll have to trouble you to take care of her in the future. Many thanks. Master Zhong hurriedly returned the greeting. He was overwhelmed by the favor and said, Wang Yi is too polite. This old man should be loyal to Master. I can't bear Wang Yi's thanks. You didn't betray her when she was in danger. How can you not bear a word of thanks? Pang Xiao smiled. Master Zhong had mixed feelings, but he could only smile back. Yuguazwe said that the person in front of him was someone who wanted to destroy the Dian. He was an enemy. He should have hated this person. But for some reason, the legendary fiendish prince was actually a hot-blooded man who valued friendship and righteousness. Head shopkeeper Zhong only felt that the rumors were misleading, so he didn't feel the slightest bit of dislike towards him. Instead, he admired his magnanimity and righteousness. In addition, Pang Xiao had bought a lot of real estate and shops in the capital. Not only did he sell Qin Yining's shops to him, he also bought many more in private. It could be said that half of the shops in the capital were now his. Master Zhong was even more certain that the rumors of a massacre were wrong. Since the common people would not suffer and Jingdo would not be flattened, Zhong Zongye secretly hoped that Pang Xiao would hurry up and attack. The incapable ruler and the demon empress had already lost the support of the people. Perhaps the common people would have a better life if the emperor was changed. He wanted the country to be stable. However, in the Yan dynasty, the imperial family could no longer guarantee the peaceful lives of the common people, wantonly exploiting and not treating people as people. Since then, the Yuchi family was no longer worthy of being on the high platform that people respected. The two of them exchanged some more pleasantries. Then, Pang Xiao turned to Qin Yining and said, You have to pay more attention to your safety these days. Try not to go out if you can. I understand. You should be careful too. The gorgeous sunset glow made her face rosy, and the light blue robe on her body was also dyed a warm color. Pang Xiao laughed. Don't worry, the person who can kill me hasn't been born yet. He reached out his hand, wanting to touch her face and get closer to her. However, there were too many people around, so in the end, he could only pat her head lovingly. Sister Yi, I'm leaving. Qin Yining nodded obediently. Her bright eyes were filled with reluctance. Pang Xiao couldn't wait to take her on the horse. Pang Xiao deliberately looked away and didn't look at her. He took a few deep breaths to suppress his reluctance to part with her. He took the reins from Huzi, turned around, smiled at her, and waved the horsewhip in his hand. Let's go. The two of them led their horses and left the courtyard. After they went out, they nimbly mounted their horses and left. Qin Yining and Master Zhong stood in place and watched their backs bathed in the sunset glow. Only when the dusty road became calm again and only the ground that was dyed golden under the sunset glow did they withdraw their gazes. Qin Yining's heart was filled with disappointment. Her originally relaxed and happy mood seemed to have been splashed with cold water. She only felt empty. Seeing her disappointment, Master Zhong shook his head and said, "Boss, let me send you back." Qin Yining nodded and said, "It's about time." They got on the carriage and avoided the crowd all the way back. In the carriage, Qin Yining was still thinking about Pang Zhao's actions just now. Master Zhong didn't feel sad about parting. He was only excited to know that the capital could be protected. He clapped his hands and said, "In this way, we don't have to worry about the future. I can also tell my family that they don't have to leave in such a hurry." Qin Yining smiled and said, "Yes. It's a pity that we can't spread this news to the people. Even if I tell them, they won't believe me. If you tell them, not only will no one believe you, but you will also be labeled as a traitor. This is definitely not a good thing for your family." "Yes. That's why sometimes I feel helpless. I can clearly see something, but I can't say it. Those people who should sell their houses and land to escape still have to escape. They can only feel at ease if they escape." Master Zhong also nodded. He also felt helpless. After thinking for a moment, Master Zhong asked again, "Boss, we've already bought a lot of land. Now that we've sold the shops and houses, and we have money in our hands, do we still want to buy more land?" Qin Yining was silent for a moment when he heard this. He said, "Why do I feel like I'm taking advantage of the people's hard work to make money? In the past, I bought their land so that the people could escape with the money. If I bought their land, I wouldn't have lowered the price too low. But now, even though I know that I won't massacre the people in the city, I still..." "Boss." Master Zhong smiled and interrupted Qin Yining. "Boss, you have a kind heart. But if you don't buy it, I'm afraid that they won't get a single cent of money and can only go on their way empty-handed. They must escape now. If the city is really destroyed in the future, won't the ownerless land still benefit the Zhou dynasty's emperor?" Qin Yining nodded. He had to admit that Master Zhong was right. Master Zhong said again, "Also, now we only know that the people of the Zhou dynasty won't massacre the people in the city, and they won't take away the property that should belong to the people. Otherwise, little Wang Yi wouldn't have changed his identity and sent people to buy property. But in the end, you're still the daughter of a wise Panin. The situation of Zhaoyun Agency is special. It's hard to guarantee that the Zhou emperor won't confiscate the property of the Wu family. Didn't you see that little Wang Yi used another identity to buy these shops? I think that he won't let the emperor know about these properties." "I know." Qin Yining sighed and said, "What's the price of the good land around the capital now?" "The good land around the capital used to be 10 taels of silver per mu, but now it's sold for 2 taels of silver. Not to mention the good land in the nearby Huizhou and other places. The land that used to be worth 20 to 30 taels of silver per mu, but now it's sold for 5 taels of silver." Qin Yining frowned and said, "In that case, shopkeeper Zhong, go ahead and purchase them. Try your best to give me a reasonable price. For the ones around the capital and the ones near Huizhou, continue to do as I said before. Only when all my silver has been used up will it be counted. Convert all my silver into farmland. If there's a chance in the future, these people will want to come back. At least they can come back to farm. Even if the land is no longer theirs, they can still eat and wear as tenants." "That's right. Master, you're not a black-hearted person who exploits tenants. In my opinion, those people living in Ning Garden can be arranged to live in your fields and manor in the future." Qin Yining also nodded, "At the very least, they can eat and wear." Although I feel guilty and feel that I've profited from a national disaster, there's nothing I can do about it. However, head shopkeeper, remember to do things in detail. If Peng Shishi can find you when they want to buy shops, it means that we haven't hidden the matter of the shops well enough. The matter of the fields must be hidden well. It's best if no one can find out that we're involved. Yes. Master, don't worry. Now that I know what to do, I know what to do. Chapter 203. When Qin Yining returned to the Marquis Fu, the door was not as tightly shut as it usually was. The main door was half open, and the gatekeeper was squatting by the stone lion at the door with a frown. He was so dejected that he almost shrunk into a quail. Beside him were two men dressed in the Chow family's guard uniform. They guarded the door with cold expressions on their faces, as if this was not the family Qin, but the Chow family's residence. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. He felt that something was wrong, and his brows were tightly furrowed. What was the Chow family up to this time? Master Zhong also noticed that the family Qin situation was unusual. He hurriedly instructed the driver, "Keep going, don't stop yet." The driver was Master Zhong's confidant. He also knew a little about the dispute between the family Qin and the Chow family. Seeing the situation, he did not dare to stop and hurriedly turned into a side alley. He only stopped after finding a secluded place. "Boss, something might have happened in the Fu. Don't be in a hurry to go back. Let the people around you go in and take a look." Ji Yun said, "Miss, don't worry. Just wait here for now. I will quietly go back and take a look without alerting anyone. I will come back later to give you news. You have to be careful." Qin Yining held Ji Yun's hand worriedly. "It is important to pay attention to your own safety. We don't know what's going on in the Fu right now. If you feel that the other party has many people or that the situation is not right, don't take the risk. There will always be another way." Ji Yun nodded emotionally. Qin Yining would never disregard the lives of the people around her to achieve her own goals. If she only had Pang Xiao as her master in the past, she only had respect for Qin Yining. Now, she already regarded her as her mistress. "Miss, don't worry. My Qinggong is not bad. I don't confront people directly, so it should be easy for me to gather information. I will be back soon." Ji Yun smiled comfortingly at Qin Yining. She then jumped off the carriage and headed in the direction of the Marquis Fu. At this time, the sky had completely darkened, and the alley was silent. Master Zhong did not allow the driver to light the lantern. It was dark inside the carriage. Bing Tang held Qin Yining's hand comfortingly and said in a low voice, "Miss, don't worry. Everything will be fine." "Yes. Don't worry, let's wait and see." That being said, Qin Yining's tone was calm, but her mind was unsettled at the moment. In that short period of time just now, she had already imagined many possibilities in her heart. After her father was reprimanded by the emperor and ordered to reflect on his mistakes, he had closed his door and refused all visitors. He only minded his own business, reading and fishing, as if he was no longer an official of the Dian court. Although Qin Huayuan didn't say it, Qin Yining, who often accompanied Qin Huayuan, knew that Qin Huayuan's depression couldn't be understood by anyone else. He was full of talent and strategy, but he cast pearls before swine. She knew that Qin Huayuan would often be torn between his loyalty and his loyalty. If he only wanted the prosperity of his family, promotion, and wealth, he would have 10,000 ways to stabilize his position. But Qin Huayuan's ambition was for the world to be at peace and for the people to live in peace. The abilities of an incapable ruler would never allow Qin Huayuan to realize his ambition. An incapable ruler would only use the officials under him as his own tools to stabilize his rule. Then he would shamelessly do whatever he wanted and use the name of the ruler to exploit his people. He only knew how to enjoy himself and was muddle-headed and immoral. Just like now, in order to secure his territory and protect his own face, the incapable ruler actually ignored the 350,000 soldiers outside the city. He was hesitant about who to hold the commander-in-chief's seal, but he had the intention to appoint someone he already knew was not a good person to contact the Titan for help. The Titan people had a long way to go. By the time the cavalry crossed the mountains to attack Dezhou, not to mention whether Dezhou would be attacked from the front and back, the Dian side would have already been conquered by Pang Zhishi. This was called Qin Yining. Even a girl in the boudoir would find it extremely laughable and hateful. What about Qin Huayuan? She believed that if she could understand this matter, her father must have already advised the emperor. But the result now was that Qin Huayuan was ordered to reflect on his mistakes. Qin Yining knew that Qin Huayuan no longer had any hope for the incapable ruler. It could even be said that his heart was like dead ashes. A loyal official whose heart was like dead ashes and no longer wanted to fight. He only wanted to fish and read quietly at home, waiting to live and die with the country. He had even lost his official position and had no real power in his hands. What could he do to the Chao family? Qin Yining's mind was full of thoughts. She could not help but bite her lower lip. After a while, she slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. As expected, kind people are often bullied. My father's intention to secure his territory is already so obvious, but the enemy will not believe it and will not understand. They will only take advantage of our weakness to step on us. So I have always thought that if there is a way, I must make myself stronger. Only then will I have the capital to be unyielding. Otherwise, I will only be stepped on in the face. Boss is right. Master Zhong nodded in understanding and sighed, Boss, don't worry too much. The Marquis's reputation is still there. The Chao family will not do anything. For the time being, Qin Yining could only comfort himself like this. But in the end, he was still very flustered. His palms were sweating in the hot weather. Not long after, Ji Yun returned. Miss, I secretly snuck into the Fu and found Chao Guizhang in the outer courtyard study talking with the Marquis and second master. The inner courtyard is fine, but the old madam is probably frightened. First madam and second madam are all waiting on her. The outer courtyard study is surrounded by people. I did not dare to disturb these people and did not dare to go close to listen. I hurriedly came to tell Mississippi. But in my opinion, the Fu is fine for the time being. Perhaps Chao Guizhang is looking for the Marquis for something. Qin Yining heard this and quietly let out a sigh of relief. It was fine as long as it was not Chao Guizhang leading people to raid the Fu. If Chao Guizhang really had the guts to do that, then it meant that the emperor was going to make a move against their family. Boss, what are you going to do now? Qin Yining said, I am going back to the Fu now. If someone asks, just say that I went to Ningyuan to visit a few sick refugees. You mention this matter and I will make arrangements. We must not expose Pang Zhishi's whereabouts today. Yes, boss, do not worry. Qin Yining instructed Master Zhong, then took Ji Yun and Bing Tang back to the Fu. The Chao family's guards in front of the Fu only glanced at Qin Yining a few times and did not stop him. Qin Yining followed his usual routine and directly passed through the Yi gate, intending to go to the second gate. Unexpectedly, just as he turned a corner, he heard footsteps behind him. A deep and sonorous voice coldly said, In the end, the matter of the Ministry of Revenue was once handled by you. Although it has been a long time, if you have the ability to embezzle, how can you be so sure that no one knows? Qin Meng, don't think that your actions are watertight. Since this old man has come to ask you about it, then I know that you were the one who led your second brother in embezzling. During this period of time, you should properly recall. In the end, the emperor has treated you well. Don't miscalculate and continue to make mistakes. Chapter 204. Guizhong Chao is right. The emperor's grace is vast and mighty. As officials, we naturally have to do our best to serve the country. We can't do anything to disappoint the emperor. Guizhong, you now have the important task of contacting the Titan. You must live up to the emperor's trust. People have limited energy, especially people like Guizhong Chao who are in the middle of his life. It's inevitable that his mind will be muddled. You are busy contacting the Titan, but you can still spare some energy to come to our house as a guest. It's really admirable. However, I still have to remind you out of kindness. Don't miscalculate the accounts, don't fail to distinguish priorities, and fail to live up to the emperor's trust in you. Qin Huayuan's voice was still calm and refined as usual. When one listened carefully, one could even hear a faint smile in his voice. But his words were sharp and piercing Guizhong Chao's heart. He thoroughly ridiculed him for hugging the Titan princess's thigh to curry favor with the Dian emperor and taking advantage of his restored power to trample on the family Qin. Guizhong Chao was so angry that his face and ears turned red. He suddenly stopped and turned back to glare at Qin Huayuan. His beard trembled as he said, "Good, very good. The Marquis of Anping is truly a man of integrity. Perhaps it's because the Marquis of Anping's father-in-law is dead that you've forgotten how to speak to his father-in-law, right?" Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "Guizhong Chao, you must be joking. I thought you already forgot that I was your son-in-law." "You?" Guizhong Chao was so angry that his fingertips trembled. He pointed fiercely at Qin Huayuan. After a while, he flicked his sleeves and said, "Just you wait. Guizhong, don't worry. I'll be right here, waiting for you." Qin Huayuan smiled, but his eyes were cold. Chao Guizhong only felt that all of his glory after his recovery was like a naked beauty in Qin Huayuan's penetrating eyes. All of his beauty was gone, and only humiliation was left. At this time, several people had already arrived in front of the door. Chao Guizhong also saw Qin Yining standing in front of the Chuehua door. Originally, he was too lazy to pay attention to the family Qin's daughter, but Qin Yining's charming appearance was too similar to Qin Huayuan's when he was young. Moreover, Qin Yining and the Empress already had a deep grudge. Last time, the Empress wanted to use the flesh of beauties to retain her beauty. She didn't use Qin Yining, but she killed 2 imperial concubines in the palace. Chao Guizhong didn't agree with the Empress's actions. But he doted on his own daughter. Even if the Empress was in the wrong, Guizhong Chao didn't want to admit that it was the Empress' fault. He put all the blame on Qin Yining. If Qin Yining hadn't angered the Empress so much, how could the Empress be like this? Chao Guizhong looked at Qin Yining with his hands behind his back and said with a smile, "So it's 4th young Miss Qin. You almost became my granddaughter-in-law." Qin Yining had already heard the tit-for-tat exchange between Qin Huayuan and Chao Guizhong. She naturally knew her position at this time. She only saluted according to etiquette and said with a smile, "This little girl doesn't dare to claim connections with you. The Chao family has a free and easy style. Young Master Chao has inherited the essence of your family's professors. This little girl has little talent and knowledge. I don't have the courage nor the foresight. I don't think I'm worthy of young Master Chao's free and easy character." Chao Guizhang's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He naturally knew that the Empress had wanted to betroth Qin Yining to his grandson, Chao Qingjun, in front of the Emperor. He didn't know what Chao Qingjun was thinking. He actually dared to flirt with Qin Yining in the palace. It was said that he didn't just flirt with her verbally, he also touched her physically. This matter even angered the Emperor. Later, the emperor even called him into the palace to reprimand him, saying that he didn't manage his family properly and that his grandson wasn't good at teaching. Qin Yining mentioning this matter now was simply slapping him in the face. Good, good, good. It's true that like father, like daughter. Both of you have sharp tongues. Chao Guozhang sneered. Qin Yining said with a smile, "Thank you for your praise, Chao Guozhang. This little girl doesn't dare to accept such praise. Compared to you and the Empress, this little girl admits defeat." Chao Guozhang was so angry that his hands trembled. He felt that it was too ugly to argue with a little girl here. He also felt that he couldn't out-talk this fox father and daughter, so he simply flicked his sleeves and left. It was useless to say anything. Right now, he just wanted to kill them. Forgive me for not seeing you off. Take care, Guozhang. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and saluted. Qin Yining also saluted along with the servants. Chao Guozhang was so angry that his hair stood on end that he walked very quickly. Looking at his back, it seemed as if he was fleeing. Qin Yining and Qin Huaiyuan watched him leave. Only when he was far away and the servants closed the door and could no longer see Chao Guozhang's figure did Qin Yining let out a laugh. Second master wiped the sweat from his forehead and said anxiously, "What should we do?" "Sister Yi, how can you still laugh? Didn't you offend him by speaking like that just now?" Qin Yining and Qin Huaiyuan looked at each other. Qin Yining said with a smile, "Second uncle, there's no need to panic. Even if we treat the Chao family with respect, they will still bully us. I heard what he said just now. He wanted to push some of the Ministry of Revenue's matters onto my father and you." Second master nodded and said, "The Ministry of Revenue has been in deficit for many years. In fact, there's been this kind of unhealthy trend in the imperial court for a long time. Many of the officials have borrowed money from the Ministry of Revenue and used the promissory notes to make the payment. Now, there's only the promissory notes and no silver left. The imperial court needs money to fight wars, and His Majesty also needs money to find skilled craftsmen. In this way, we don't have enough silver. Chao Guozhang wants to use this matter to stab us in the heart. He really knows how to think of a way. He wants to use this matter to say that my father didn't do a good job. When the imperial court needs money, His Majesty will definitely pay more attention to this matter. If he uses my father, I'm afraid that the situation won't be good." Qin Yining's brows furrowed in worry. The worried look on his face was completely different from the person who dared to confront Chao Guozhang directly. Qin Huaiyuan shook his head. "This is called disaster befalling from the sky behind closed doors. I've already decided to live in seclusion and go fishing in a swallow, waiting to accompany His Majesty in life and death." However, he still took the initiative to come to our door. "Second brother, you don't need to worry. Even if I kneel down and beg him right now, they won't be lenient with us. Today, I did say a lot of things in my impulsiveness. However, I felt much more refreshed after saying them. It's just that I've troubled you and implicated you." Second master waved his hand and said, "Big brother, what are you saying? Even if this matter didn't happen, we're still a family. Your matter is my matter. For those who want to harm us, if they want to harm us, they can always find an excuse. This time won't make a difference." Qin Huaiyuan smiled bitterly, completely lacking the high-spirited and vigorous spirit he had in front of Chao Guozhang. At this time, he was so tired that his shoulders drooped. He was completely different from the person who was always as tall and straight as a mountain in the past. Father, daughter, uncle, and nephew led the servants through the Chuihua gate. When they arrived in front of Ci Shao Garden, Qin Huaiyuan sighed and said, "The emperor relies heavily on him, so he naturally wants to take advantage of this opportunity to harm our family. I think that the situation is hopeless. With His Majesty's temperament, as long as Chao Guozhang gives him some hope and says that the Titan might come to help, His Majesty wouldn't hesitate to immediately issue an edict to take my life. I'm really... When Second Master heard this, he felt so sad that tears almost flowed out of his eyes. For many years, Qin Huaiyuan had devoted himself to the country, sparing no effort, and wholeheartedly devoted himself to court politics. He didn't expect that he would end up in this situation. Not only was he stripped of his official position and forced to reflect on his mistakes, but he was also bullied by dogs. Qin Yining looked worriedly at Qin Huaiyuan and Second Master. She knew that a person who had devoted his entire life to the court was suppressed to this state by Chao Guozhang, who was indulged by the emperor. It really made one feel sad. This kind of matter couldn't be resolved with just a few words from others. Qin Yining could only smile and say, "Father, second uncle, don't worry. I don't think this matter will necessarily get out of control. After all, Chao Guozhang doesn't have any evidence and can't go to the emperor to report it. Father, as long as he can't report it, we still have time. We can always think of a way." Qin Yining smiled. His warm smile gave people the feeling of a sunflower bathing in the sunlight, making people feel that it was full of vitality and hope. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and shook his head. He didn't say anything else and entered the second gate. This kind of matter could only be known by the warm and the cold. Qin Yining knew that it was useless to persuade him, so he followed to see the old madam. At this time, the womenfolk were all gathered in the old madam's room. Mammy Qin saw that Qin Huaiyuan had returned and hurriedly went into the room to report. She personally lifted the bead curtain at the door for Qin Huaiyuan, Second Master, and Qin Yining. Ji Xiang lifted the bamboo curtain made of muslin from the inside. After entering the room, the servants immediately and deftly put down the muslin curtain, blocking out any mosquitoes that might fly into the room. When the old madam saw Qin Huaiyuan, she hastily sat up. "Menggu, what did Chao Guozhang come here for? Did something happen again? I think that if you didn't stop him today, he would have brought people in to search the house. That won't happen. Isn't everything fine now?" Qin Huaiyuan sat down next to the old madam. "You don't have to worry. It's not a big matter. It's just that the war needs money now. The Ministry of Revenue can't take out the money, so they brought up some old matters from when I was the Prime Minister. Perhaps they want to put all the money that was lost on me. However, they don't have concrete evidence, so it's fine for the time being. It's fine for the time being." When the old madam heard these words, she was so angry that her face turned green. She almost couldn't breathe properly. Mammy Qin, who was standing next to the old madam, quickly helped her lie down. She gently persuaded her and fed her some water. Only then did the old madam's expression become slightly better. "Isn't this because the heavens want our family Qin to be destroyed? Menggu is an honest and upright official. How could he do such a thing? This is called, if you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext." The old madam's words made all the womenfolk in the room unable to stop themselves from anxiously shedding tears. Now, their family was like the monkeys scatter when the tree falls. After Qin Huaiyuan was forced to resign, the people who were close to him in the past didn't interact with him anymore. Everyone knew what was going on in their hearts and didn't disturb each other. Now that such a big matter had happened, it was extremely difficult to count on anyone to speak up for Qin Huaiyuan. However, Guozhang Chao had regained power and was the sole power in the imperial court. Wouldn't he take the opportunity to seek revenge? Whoever was an official in the imperial court had the power to speak. Second Old Master was only an insignificant official in the Ministry of Rights. Qin Huaiyuan didn't have an official position anymore. Now, their family Qin didn't even have a single person to speak up for them in the imperial court. Everyone's expressions were extremely miserable. Just as everyone was silent and the old madam and the members of the Sun clan were silently shedding tears, Chi Tai's voice suddenly came from outside. Marquis, Marquis. Qin Huayuan stood up and looked outside the screen window. He saw Chi Tai standing in the corridor. The anxiety on his face could be seen clearly under the light. What's the matter?